Chapter 1361. Peng, peng, peng. Situ Lin cried out in pain. Though Zhao Ku was furious, he was even more wronged. Why was he being beaten up for no reason? Young Master Ku, what did I do wrong? Young Master Ku, please have mercy. I only found a beauty for you. If you are not satisfied, we can exchange again. Exchange your sister. Zhao Ku's eyes were about to spit fire. He actually dared to mention this matter. He was even more enraged. If possible, he naturally wanted to play with that kind of exquisite beauty. More importantly, Ling Han had the background of a Genesis tier, and even his decree could not do anything. How could he afford to provoke such a malefic existence? You bastard, I will pull out your tendons and peel off your skin. Zhao Ku attacked fiercely. He was a typical spoiled brat, so what fear would he have? With a single punch, Situ Lin's arm was broken, and with just a few punches, Situ Lin's face was unrecognizable, and he was not far from death. What was pitiful was that Situ Lin still did not know why he had been beaten up even now. How wronged! A cold snort rang out as a silhouette leapt down from the second floor. It was a tall old man who looked to be in his 60s or 70s. However, his body was sturdy and his essence chi was exuberant. He was a powerful figure of the Situ clan, and his name was Situ Genuan. Though he was not at the level of an ancestor, he was a powerful figure once he advanced into the heavenly body tier, and he was an existence in the high extreme, able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Zhao Ku. It was fine if it was a small scuffle between the younger generation, but now it was obviously going to result in someone's death. Thus, no matter how powerful Zhao Ku's background was, he could not possibly sit back and watch. Otherwise, if a member of the Situ clan was beaten to death in Gathering Wind City, would he still have the face to see others in the future? Old thing, you dare to point fingers at me? Zhao Ku showed the style of a profligate young master. Those who were not as powerful as his clan, he dared to offend as much as he could. Situ Genuan almost exploded in fury. Ever since he advanced into the heavenly body tier, when had he ever been publicly called an old thing? He humphed and said, "Release him." He, too, knew the style of people like Zhao Ku, so he could not be bothered to argue, and simply asked him to release him. What if I don't? Zhao Ku didn't care at all. Apart from Ling Han, who had a Genesis tier background that he couldn't defeat, the rest were mediocre, and he really didn't take them seriously. Even if it was a member of the current royal family, he was not very afraid. It was just a competition of fathers. Then I can only offend you. Situ Genuan reached out, grabbing towards Zhao Ku. However, he knew when to stop. He only wanted to save Situ Lin. You dare to fight against me? Zhao Ku snorted coldly. Silver light flickered on his body, and his divine might was like that of a god as he counterattacked Situ Genuan. The silver dragon battle armor activated, providing him with a practically invincible defense. This was something that no one below the Eternal River tier could break through. Situ Genuan's strength was originally only on par with Zhao Ku's. Now, with the addition of the silver dragon armor, he was naturally at a complete disadvantage. And this was still because Zhao Ku had given a large number of god tools to Ling Han. Otherwise, he would only need to use a decree, and he would be able to instantly kill Situ Genuan into pieces. Thankfully, Situ Genuan had no intention of fighting to the death with Zhao Ku. He deliberately lured Zhao Ku to pursue him, and then shook him off, turning back and finally saving Si Malin. The pitiful Si Malin's expression was filled with gloom. He still didn't know why he had been beaten. This caused a lump of resentment to form in his heart, and he couldn't swallow it no matter what. In fact, because of such heavy injuries, he should have fainted, but now his eyes were wide open. If he didn't get to the bottom of this, he really wouldn't die in peace. Hee, Brother Han, long time no see. Zhao Ku greeted Ling Han. When he saw that Ling Han didn't show any anger, he also calmed down. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given up so easily and would definitely keep his eyes on Si Malin. Si Malin finally spat out a mouthful of blood. So that was how it was. No wonder Zhao Ku almost burst his ass. He actually knew Ling Han long ago. Him sowing dissension like this must have angered Zhao Ku. Also, even a spoiled brat like Zhao Ku respectfully addressed Ling Han as brother. Then what kind of background did Ling Han have? No matter what, he had to be in the eternal river tier. See, Malin wanted to spit blood again. He felt his ass clench, and the situation was extremely bad. We are quite fated. Ling Han smiled. He couldn't forget that silver dragon armor that Zhao Ku was wearing. If he could snatch it and give it to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, that would be great. Brother Han also came for the highest jade essence heart? Zhao Ku asked carefully. If his father saw his current appearance, he definitely wouldn't believe that this was his biological son. Ling Han nodded and said, "You also came for that?" "No, not likely." Zhao Ku hurriedly shook his head. What a joke. How would he dare to compete with Ling Han? I came to protect Brother Han. Whoever dares to compete with Brother Han, I'll deal with them. Not bad, you have quite a good eye, Ling Han said with a smile. Zhao Ku's eyes instantly lit up. Though he was acting like a grandson now, if he formed a good relationship with Ling Han, then wouldn't he have the support of a Genesis tier? Then, wouldn't he be able to do as he pleased in the whole great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire? He could kill whoever he wanted, and sleep with whoever he wanted. Just thinking about it made him a little excited. Brother Han, please. Zhao Ku respectfully led Ling Han into the auction house. When Situ Jianyuan saw the two of them disappear, he shouted at Situ Lin, "What's going on?" Situ Lin felt incredibly wronged. How would he know what was going on? Things just had to be so coincidental. He had paid such a huge price to invite Zhao Ku over, and had originally wanted to borrow his strength, but the result was a slap to his own face. Trash, go back to the clan and reflect on your actions. Situ Jianyuan humphed. If he offended Zhao Ku because of this, and the Zhao clan bore a grudge against him, then Gathering Wind City might become 2 great clans instead of 3 great clans in future. How could Situ Lin still dare to make a sound? He could only leave dejectedly. As he left, pieces of flesh fell off from all over his body, and blood flowed all over the ground. He was extremely wretched. In the auction house, Zhao Ku was like a lackey, and led Ling Han into a private room. This was actually reserved by Situ Lin, but now, Zhao Ku had made use of it to present it to Ling Han. If Situ Lin knew about this, he would definitely spit out a few more mouthfuls of blood, and it was even possible that he would die from anger. In the private room, Zhao Ku's eyes did not shift. The divine phoenix maiden was right beside him, yet he did not even spare her a glance. He was practically more upright than any gentleman, causing even Ling Han's face to twitch slightly. This was really too you good at acting. Not long after, the auction began. Ling Han was not interested in any other items. This time, he had specifically come for the highest jade essence heart. Thus, he kept his eyes closed and pretended to be asleep, while Zhao Ku spoke endlessly at one side, trying his best to curry favor with him. "Everyone, the next item to be auctioned is the highest jade essence heart," the auctioneer announced loudly, and instantly ignited everyone's enthusiasm. The starting price is 50 million true origin stones, and each increment must not be lower than 10 million, 50 million. Zhao Ku immediately called out loudly, "My father is Zhao Zui, who dares to compete with me." This spoiled brat was incredibly arrogant. In order to curry favor with Ling Han, he was willing to go all out. Chapter 1362. What was an auction? That was naturally a competition, and the highest bidder would win. But Zhao Ku, on the other hand, immediately used his father's name to smash others. This involuntarily caused many people to look furious, wanting nothing more than to drag him out and give him a good beating. How could he be so domineering? Ling Han, however, smiled faintly. With such a spoiled brat leading the charge, he could spend the least amount of money to obtain the highest jade essence heart. Humph, the auction is about who has more money, not competing with one's father, someone said coldly in a private room. 60 million, he raised his bid. How dare you, who do you think you are? Do you dare to report your name? Zhao Ku shouted in anger. He had already reported his father's name, but the other actually dared not give him face. This was a serious provocation to him. To be honest, there was really no one that great young Master Zhao feared in the great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. Even if the grandson of the Crimson Flame Emperor came, he would still dare to slam the table with him. Gu clan Gu Xiaoyun? A proud voice rang out from that private room. His arrogant attitude was not the slightest bit inferior to Zhao Ku's. Gu. Could it be that Gu clan? The great General Gu, who was once on par with Xie Qian, one of the two tigers of the empire. Definitely. If not, how would he have the confidence to compete with the Zhao clan? Everyone gave an "oh," their expressions very excited. If they were destined to be unable to obtain the highest jade essence heart, then they naturally hoped that the auction price of this item was as high as possible. Only then would their hearts be balanced. 70 million. Zhao Ku said very angrily. The other also had the background of an Eternal River tier elite, so at least he did not need to be afraid of him, which made him very displeased. Come, it was impossible to use his father to suppress others, so he could only compete with his wealth. Brother Han, don't worry. I have brought 200 million true origin stones this time, and will definitely obtain the highest jade essence heart for Brother Han. He vowed. Ling Han smiled slightly. He did not like to take advantage of others, but this kind of spoiled brat was an exception. Previously, he had even dared to have designs on the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. If it were not for the fact that he was still wearing the Silver Dragon armor, he would have long since died. Now that this profligate brat wanted to curry favor, Ling Han naturally would not stop him. However, if he knew in the future that the notionless saint was only an empty shell, would he spit blood in anger? Thinking about it, it was necessary. Pretending to be a grandson and losing a divine artifact was simply a great humiliation. However, if that day really came, who knew? Ling Han might have already advanced into the Eternal River tier, and would directly tear apart this guy's Silver Dragon battle armor, sending him on his way. 80 million, Gu Xiaoyun said calmly as if he was sitting on a mountain of gold. 90 million. Zhao Ku did not hesitate to raise the price. 100 million, 110 million. With these two young masters of great clans fighting, the price of the highest jade essence heart skyrocketed, and the others didn't even have the chance to bid for it. In an instant, it surpassed the bottom line in their hearts. However, when the price reached 150 million, even Zhao Ku began to break out in a cold sweat. He had only brought 200 million true origin stones with him, and he was already very close to the bottom line. However, the other party was still calm and unruffled, as if the wealth he possessed was far more than this number. This made him feel very embarrassed. This was in front of young Master Han. He couldn't even complete the first task, so how could he bear it? 200 million. He directly called out his bottom line, trying to overwhelm the other party with his imposing manner. Hiss, it's already 200 million. Though the highest jade essence heart is priceless, and the appearance of one would cause a huge fight, 200 million is still too much. About 100 million should be the limit. There's nothing to be done. With two young masters of great clans fighting, I wouldn't be surprised even if it was sold for 300 million. The majority of people had come for the highest jade essence heart, but they didn't even have the chance to bid for it. The price was raised so fiercely that even Gu Xiaoyun was stunned, and actually didn't follow up. 200 million going once. 200 million going twice. 210 million. Just when Zhao Ku thought he had it under control, he heard Gu Xiaoyun speak up, raising the price again. Zhao Ku immediately cursed, but when the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden frowned, he hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, sister-in-law. It's my bad mouth, I'll punish myself." Pa, he used his hand to slap himself a few times. Of course, it was only a touch, to express his stance. At this high position, it had actually far surpassed the value that the highest jade essence heart should have. Only two young masters of great clans would fight to their heart's content. Thus, the others were only acting and no one was interested. Young Master Han, "I'm sorry, I don't have enough money," Zhao Ku said, his face red. But there was nothing he could do. Aside from the Silver Dragon armor, all his other belongings had been extorted by Ling Han. Could it be that he didn't need to spend money to buy more? In this case, no matter how much money he had, it wouldn't be enough for him to squander. It was actually not easy for him to still have 200 million left. Ling Han didn't mind, and opened his mouth to say, 250 million. Everyone was surprised. A third person actually appeared, and this person was obviously in the same private room as Zhao Ku. Which clan's young master was this? Oh, right, wasn't it the Situ clan that was entertaining Zhao Ku this time? Those who were well informed immediately thought of this, and whispered in private. Very soon, everyone knew that the person who was bidding now was Situ Lin. This Situ Lin is really quite bold, actually daring to compete with the young master of the Gu clan. The main thing is that the price now is already very high. If the young master of the Gu clan still wins in the end, then Gu Xiaoyun will definitely think that Situ Lin deliberately raised the price, and it will be hard for him to not bear a grudge. But if Situ Lin wins in the auction, Gu Xiaoyun will definitely lose face. No matter which result, the Situ clan will probably offend the Gu clan. This is not good. If Situ Lin was here, he would definitely vomit blood again. Motherfucker, this was too unfair, wasn't it? 260 million. Young Master Gu hesitated for a moment before increasing the price. Right now, this price had also exceeded his expectations, but as the young master of the Gu clan, how could he admit defeat? Now, what they were competing for was not the highest jade essence heart, but a breath of air. 300 million. Ling Han was very calm. Not only did he have a huge sum of 1 billion true origin stones, he also had many medicinal pills and divine tools that he entrusted to the auction to sell. Most of them were Zhao Ku's belongings, and no matter what, he could sell them for at least 200 to 300 million. Thus, he was rich and overbearing and didn't care at all. 310 million. Gu Xiaoyun wiped off his cold sweat. He already had a premonition that he was going to lose. As expected, Ling Han's voice immediately drifted over. 350 million. This time, Gu Xiaoyun hesitated for a good while, but in the end he didn't speak again. 350 million going once. 350 million going twice. 350 million going thrice, sold. The auctioneer knocked on the table and decided the ownership of the highest jade essence heart. Chapter 1364. Less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn out of the city, they saw a figure streaking across the sky, blocking their way. This was a blue-skinned man. Needless to say, this was definitely a member of the Situ clan. Furthermore, Ling Han had seen him before. It was none other than Situ Jianyuan. Sir, as an elite of the heavenly body tier, you actually used the name of a junior of my clan. Don't you think you are going too far? Situ Jianyuan asked calmly, yet there were divine patterns glowing on his hands, and he was preparing a powerful move. Ling Han was very calm and said, "Did I ever say that I was a member of the Situ clan? If others misunderstand, that is their business. I have no obligation to correct the mistakes of others. Humph, no matter how glib your tongue is, I will capture you today." Situ Jianyuan suddenly leaped up and charged towards Ling Han. He had to end the battle quickly. He was not the only heavenly body tier elite in Gathering Wind City, and there were plenty of people who coveted Ling Han's wealth. If he did not quickly kill Ling Han, it would be troublesome when there were more people later. But, with a quick stride, he had already charged to within 9 meters of Ling Han. At this distance, he could maximize his attack. He shot out a palm strike, and divine patterns bloomed, forming a light seal that was 9 meters in circumference, blasting towards Ling Han. Behind him, 3 heavenly bodies appeared, showing his cultivation level of the high extreme. Boom, the 3 heavenly bodies added power to the light seal, forming a destructive attack. As the light seal swept past, the ground was brutally ravaged, and multiple cracks appeared, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. In that flash, the light seal had already reached in front of Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a hand and pressed forward. An ear-piercing sound rang out, and Ling Han was continuously pushed back by the light seal. As he moved, a deep trench appeared in the ground, and he only stopped after retreating for 100 miles. And after the light seal flashed, it finally disappeared. Situ Jianyuan couldn't help but gape, an expression of shock appearing on his face. Motherfucker, what kind of strength and physique is this? his opponent was only in the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, while he was in the middle stage of the high extreme. There was a gap of 9 subminor levels between the two of them, so this should have been an absolute suppression. However, his opponent actually wasn't crushed by his power. Instead, he was slowly neutralizing his power by knocking him back. Isn't his physique a little too strong? Otherwise, how could he have withstood such an impact? He would have been reduced to ashes long ago. Pervert. Ling Han retracted his hand and couldn't help but frown. The difference in cultivation is too big. It's too forceful. There was a difference of 9 stars in their cultivation. Even if Situ Genuan was only a 1-star genius, there was still a difference of 4 stars in their strength. That's a difference of 10,000 times. Fortunately, strength was only a part of battle prowess. Since Situ Genuan had made a move, he naturally did not plan on letting Ling Han leave alive. He let out a long howl, and the 3 stars revolved around his body, turning into large stars. Then he pushed them towards Ling Han to suppress him. Boom! The large stars crashed down like the end of the world. Ling Han was unmoved. With a wave of his hand, he sent the heavenly phoenix divine maiden into the distance. Then he pointed at Situ Genuan and smilingly said, "Old geezer, don't be too arrogant." He released heaven's might. Boom! As his aura swept out, the surrounding area of 10 miles was enveloped. What? Situ Genuan couldn't help but pale in shock. He suddenly discovered that his strength had actually dropped by 2 stars. That was 2 stars of strength, which was equivalent to reducing his cultivation by 2 subminor levels. All of a sudden, the gap between his and Ling Han's strength had shrunk to 2 stars. Though it was still a suppression, when added with Ling Han's terrifying physique, it was already within the range that Ling Han could endure. Though it can't be considered a battle between equals, I am invincible in the same cultivation level, so there's no meaning in that. Ling Han roared and shot out, launching a counterattack at Situ Genuan. He used his finger as a sword and used the lightning sword technique, which was as fast as lightning. There was indeed a gap between the two of them in power, but the lightning sword technique had drawn on the might of heavenly tribulation and fused with the power of regulation that Ling Han had grasped. Its might was extraordinarily great, and could at least make up for the gap of 1 star in battle prowess. At first, there was a gap of 2 minor levels between the two of them, but with Ling Han's frequent use of techniques, his battle prowess had shrunk to the level of only 1 star. Now there was a fight to be had. Situ Genuan was exploding with shock. At first, he had thought that his attack this time would be a sure thing. Even if Ling Han could escape, he would at least have to burn his life force, which would affect the advancement of his cultivation level in the future, and he would no longer be a threat. But Ling Han actually dared to face him head-on, and was actually only slightly weaker than him. This was something that he could not accept. Spirit awakening technique. Situ Genuan finally did not dare to have any more contempt towards Ling Han, and used the true secret technique of the Situ clan. His fingers moved and drew out one strange symbol after another, and the strange thing was that these symbols flickered in the air as if they were writing on a piece of paper. By the decree of the heavens, spirit of the heavens, spirit of the earth, show yourself. Boom. Following his loud shout, the spiritual chi in the air condensed, turning into a massive humanoid existence. Its body was covered in divine patterns, and the earth split open, and a massive being formed from Earth's spiritual chi similarly crawled out. Very powerful, Ling Han immediately thought. These two beings formed from spiritual chi, let's just say that they were spiritual bodies. They were very powerful, and they were not true living beings, so they naturally did not fear injury or death. The Situ Genuan pointed, and the two spiritual bodies immediately swung their fists at Ling Han. The massive fists were like mountains descending from the sky. Ling Han waved his hand and finally used Tide of the Ages. This was a celestial technique. In the past, when Ding Yaolong had used this secret technique, even those who were 2 minor levels higher than him were no match for him. Now, when it was used by Ling Han, it had achieved the same effect. Ling Han took the opportunity to counterattack. Peng, peng, peng. With just a few punches, These two spiritual bodies were smashed into smithereens. Situ Jinyuan's mouth was completely agape. He could not believe that this secret technique of his clan would be so weak before Ling Han. Shio. One figure after another descended from the skies. They were all heavenly body tier elites of Gathering Wind City. Though they had appeared slightly late, it was clear that they had not missed the show. And they just happened to see Ling Han display his invincible might, destroying the two spiritual bodies. This caused their collective scalps to go numb. This young man was too ferocious, wasn't he? There were many who did not say another word, and directly turned to leave. As long as Ling Han did not die, his future would be limitless. It was better not to become enemies with such a person. However, there were also some who could not suppress their greed, and still stood around Ling Han, their eyes sinister. Hand over the highest jade essence heart and all the true origin stones, and we can spare your life, someone shouted. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he couldn't help but smile. There are a total of 8 of you, so who should I give the things to? You do not need to worry about that. Hand over the things, another person said. Obviously, these people were all wily old foxes. How could they possibly fall for Ling Han's ploy to sow dissension? Ling Han's right hand shook, and the divine demon sword was finally drawn. What if I say no? Then die. Chapter 1365. Situ Jianyuan and the other 7 moved at the same time, attacking Ling Han. He was the only outsider. If they killed him, they could discuss how to divide the highest jade essence heart and a large number of true origin stones. But if Ling Han was not killed, everything would only be flowers in the water, the moon in the mirror. Among the 8 great heavenly body tier elites, Situ Jianyuan was still the strongest. There were 2 others who had reached the high extreme, but they were only in the early stage. Among the remaining 5, 3 were in the medium extreme, and 2 were in the low extreme. They all used their secret techniques, wanting to quickly suppress Ling Han. Boom, stars appeared. Some were exuding a dark black light, while some were as dazzling as the sun. A terrifying power swept out, showing no mercy. Ling Han gripped the divine demon sword, laughed, and said, "Old friend, we're going to start a massacre." The divine demon sword released a soft cry, and the blade vibrated on its own, like the roar of a dragon or tiger. After being nurtured for a long time, this celestial tool had also slowly gained sentience. He used heaven's might and suppressed the cultivation of the 8 great heavenly body tier elites by 2 stars. What's going on? Why has my power plummeted? What kind of secret technique is this? Aside from Situ Jianyuan, the other 7 all exclaimed in shock. This sudden loss of power that they were familiar with caused them to be at a loss, as if the end of the world had arrived. Ling Han gripped his sword and moved. Sword light crisscrossed, piercing through the 9 heavens. Pu, Piu, immediately 2 heads flew into the air. Blood spurted out from the severed necks, shooting into the sky. Those were 2 elites in the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. In the great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, or even in the whole immortal realm, they could be called elites, yet they could not even withstand a single strike from Ling Han, and were directly insta-killed, their spirits destroyed. Peng. For this, Ling Han also paid the price of being hit by the attacks of 6 great elites, but he only spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Though his body was still pierced, he had avoided his godly bones, so it could be said that these were only superficial wounds. Damn, what kind of defense is that? Someone cried out. This was too illogical. Since Ling Han had used most of his strength to kill people, his defense should be extremely weak at this time. How could he have only spat out a few mouthfuls of blood and pierced a few holes after being attacked by 6 experts? What a monster! Ling Han broke into a grin and activated the indestructible heaven scroll. The wounds on his body immediately healed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in the blink of an eye, he had already recovered to his original state. Damn it! This time, even Situ Jianyuan was dumbfounded. He only knew that Ling Han's physique was strong, but he did not know that Ling Han's recovery ability was even more terrifying. How do you kill a monster like that? They still did not know that Ling Han would only need to circulate a single drop of the indestructible true fluid to heal all of his injuries, no matter how severe they were. They also did not know that Ling Han would be able to rise from the ashes and come back to life from extreme death. Not only would his injuries be healed, even his strength would be restored to its peak. Unfortunately, with their strength, it was probably impossible for them to force Ling Han to this extent. Ling Han shouted in a low voice, a cold glint shooting from his eyes. At this moment, his killing intent was boiling. If he did not kill all of these people, his sword would not return to its sheath. Situ Jianyuan panicked. He did not care that his opponent was only in the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, and hurriedly shouted, "Join forces." If Ling Han continued to trade injuries for lives like this, then in a few exchanges, they would all die. And what about Ling Han? This guy was completely immortal, so he would be fine no matter how he switched. The 6 of them joined forces, helping each other out. This was indeed very effective. Ling Han's strength was not strong enough to suppress the 6 of them. Thus, while Situ Jianyuan and the others could not wound him, Ling Han was temporarily unable to do anything to the 6 of them either. "Sir, we acknowledge your strength," Situ Jianyuan said. "How about this? You hand over the item, and we only want half." Only half. The others all nodded. This stalemate was not a solution. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh and said, "Have you all been kicked in the head by a donkey? This is clearly my item, so why should I share half with you? It's better if you all leave your lives here and offer all the items you have to me." Wishful thinking. The 6 of them all rebuked. Though they could not do anything to Ling Han's defense at the moment, it was more than enough to protect themselves if they joined forces. "Is that so?" Ling Han charged over. Scram. The 6 of them attacked together, blasting at Ling Han. "Tide of the Ages," Ling Han said softly. He waved his left hand, and the flood of time surged. The attacks that the 6 of them had shot out instantly aged, actually unable to stop his advance. Ling Han unsheathed his sword, and used the lightning sword technique. The divine demon sword radiated with endless divine light. This was a future celestial tool. When Ling Han swept past, another heavenly body tier elite collapsed. The top of his head had been directly sliced off by the divine demon sword, and his divine sense was naturally destroyed as well. This person's eyes were still wide open, as if filled with disbelief. He could still die like this? "There are only 5 left," Ling Han said calmly. And it was precisely this calm tone that caused the 5 elites who had walked out of a sea of swords and sabers to feel a chill run through their bodies, as if they had fallen into an icy cavern. Ling Han shook the divine demon sword, and charged out again. The 5 elites joined forces, but were helpless against the tide of the ages. Their attacks instantly aged, as if they had not moved to stop it. And in terms of defense, as long as one was directly struck by the divine demon sword, what defense could not be broken? At least, among the heavenly body tier, there was already no defense that could not be broken under the direct strike of the divine demon sword. Pew pew pew. One after another, heads flew into the air, and blood sprayed everywhere. One elite after another collapsed, and finally, only Situ Jianyuan and the other 2 elites at the high extreme remained. It was not that their defense could block the divine demon sword, but rather that they were no longer working together. Once the attack arrived, they all fled in different directions, and were not struck by the divine demon sword. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. He hadn't wasted so much energy and wealth. After advancing to level 9, the divine demon sword had become even more terrifying. This was the might that a future celestial tool should possess. "Capture her!" Situ Jianyuan suddenly pointed at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. "That's right. Capture this woman to threaten this brat." The eyes of the other 2 lit up, and they immediately charged toward the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. "You're seeking death." Ling Han's killing intent blazed, and he suddenly waved his hand, flinging the notionless saint out again. "Damn brat, are you done?" The notionless saint naturally stopped his comprehension immediately after leaving the environment of the reincarnation tree. In his fury, he completely unleashed his saint aura. "Woo! Situ Jianyuan and the other two felt a chill run down their spines. This was the aura of a saint. Ling Han took this opportunity to charge out, using the star-plucking step. After comprehending the might of heavenly tribulation, his speed had also become even more terrifying. He instantly charged over, waving the divine demon sword. Poo pew pew. 3 heads flew into the sky without any suspense. After being intimidated by the aura of a saint, Situ Jianyuan and the other two didn't even manage to resist for a moment. Brat. The notionless saint still wanted to say something, yet he was directly sucked into the Black Tower by Ling Han. His movements were smooth, and he was practically used to it. Reading on a mobile phone was even more refreshing. Chapter 1366. Ling Han put away the spatial spirit tools of the 8 heavenly body tier elites, and directly soared into the sky and left. He didn't care what kind of storm would blow in Gathering Wind City after so many heavenly body tier elites died. His principle was very simple. If you wanted to kill him, then he would kill you. There was nothing to say. A few days later, Ling Han arrived at Big Trade City. There was a large amount of wealth left in the spatial spirit tools of the 8 heavenly body tier elites. In total, there were as many as 200 to 300 million true origin stones. This made Ling Han very satisfied. Sure enough, robbery was the best way to get rich. Everyone exited the Black Tower. After this stop, they would return to Joint Peace Planet, so they had to make some preparations. Those who needed to pack up were packed, and those who needed to be taken away were also prepared to set off. As Ling Han's cultivation level became higher and higher, he was less and less afraid of others knowing that he had a spatial god tool. Of course, the true secret of the Black Tower couldn't be exposed, or even the celestial realm would be shocked. Ling Han headed to the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He had promised to help Han Xinyan grasp the refinement method of the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. Now that 10 years had passed, he wondered how that woman had learned it. 10 years was very long, but how could a level 8 divine pill be so easy to grasp? Previously, even when Ling Han comprehended it under the reincarnation tree, he had used a few months' time. In normal times, if not over 100 years, it would at least take a few dozen years. Ling Han was the Alchemy Emperor, and even he needed such a long time, so there was no need to mention others. Last time, he had come in a hurry and brought Ding Ping, Qin Ruijing and the others away. He didn't go to the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Thus, this was also the first time he had come here after 10 years. In the immortal realm, 10 years wasn't long. The majority of people had long lifespans, and 10 years wouldn't even cause them to have an extra strand of white hair. Thus, when Ling Han arrived, someone immediately recognized him. Grandmaster Ling. Someone called out one after another. Previously, Ling Han had defeated all the alchemists of the Treasure Forest Pavilion alone, and won everyone's respect. Ling Han nodded with a smile. After passing on the message, he met Lin Yuqi in a small garden. This great bewitching beauty was still incredibly seductive, and there was an indescribable charm in her eyes and brows. She swept her eyes over Ling Han, and couldn't help but look shocked. She said, 10 years ago, you were only in the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Ling Han nodded with a look of disapproval. But you're already at the heavenly body tier now. She was a little driven mad. Can't you at least act a little shocked? It's too boring to let me make a fuss all by myself. I know. Ling Han nodded. He naturally knew his own cultivation level best. Moreover, because he had reached the heavenly body tier, Ling Han could also tell that Lin Yuqi's cultivation level was also at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Lin Yuqi couldn't help but feel speechless. After a while, the curiosity and shock on her face disappeared, and she became seductive and sweet again. She purposefully moved a little closer, and a fragrant wind wafted over. It was clearly very rich, but it wasn't so pungent. Little handsome, tell big sister. How did you reach the heavenly body tier so quickly? Ling Han took a step back and said, shouldn't madam already know? It's because of the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. Pei, do you think big sister hasn't eaten it before? Lin Yuqi humphed and said, every time the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill is consumed, there will be a period of at least 3 years. If consumed continuously, the divine pill will become a fatal poison. Tell me, how did you consume so many berserk blood spirit pills in 10 years? Others didn't have a way, but that didn't mean that he didn't either. The Black Tower was a precious treasure of the celestial realm, and Hunyo had reached the Genesis tier in 5 years. In comparison, he was ridiculously slow. Ling Han only smiled faintly. This was related to his secret, so he naturally couldn't tell an outsider. Yo, you're treating Big Sister like an outsider, and you're still not willing to tell me. Lin Yuqi was about to explode in anger. 10 years had passed, and this guy hadn't changed at all. He still didn't care about her charm. Then Big Sister will obey you and become your woman, okay? Her voice was like orchids, and her eyes shone brightly. Sure, Ling Han said with a smile. Since she wanted to play, he wasn't afraid of her. He made a move to hug her and said with a smile, "Come, I'll take you as my 19th concubine." Pay. Lin Yuqi hurriedly turned around and lightly retreated. Little handsome, who would have thought that you're actually this kind of person? You even dare to tease Big Sister. She was seductive, but she had always only toyed with the feelings of others. Naturally, she wouldn't allow Ling Han to take advantage of her. Ling Han directly ignored her and asked, "Has Han Xinyan mastered the berserk blood spirit pill?" Lin Yuqi shook her head, a look of disappointment on her face. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she said, "Little handsome, do you want a good fortune?" "What good fortune? Tell me about it." Ling Han didn't deny this. "Since you're an alchemist, you'll definitely be interested," Lin Yuqi said confidently. She paused for a moment and then continued. "The Treasure Forest Pavilion is composed of 4 major clans, namely the Lin, Shi, Han, and Huang clans. Not only do the 4 major clans compete for power, but there is also internal strife within each clan. The Treasure Forest Pavilion has been refining medicine for generations, and the reason why it has become the most powerful alchemy force in the long light galaxy is because," she paused and looked at Ling Han as she slowly said, "we've mastered an ancient mystery realm, and we can obtain pill recipes and even godly medicines from it. However, this mystery realm only opens once every 100,000 years, and the number of people who can enter is limited. The number of slots that different branches of each clan can obtain has to be determined through an intense competition. However, there is an age limit to enter the mystery realm. Not only can they not be over 1 million years old, but their relative age must also be below 30 years old. Thus, when determining the number of slots, only those who satisfy this condition can participate. Although Xinyan's surname is Han, she grew up in the Lin clan, and the Lin clan has high hopes for her. However, she hasn't grasped the refinement method of the berserk blood spirit pill, so it's very difficult for her to obtain a good result in the competition. If you join the Lin clan's branch of our Anyuan Lin clan, and you can enter the top 10, I'll give you a slot to enter the ancient mystery realm. Whatever pill recipes and godly medicines you obtain will be up to you. How about it?" Ling Han didn't agree immediately. In reality, he had the Black Tower, so he didn't have to worry about being tricked. However, agreeing too quickly wasn't good either. He would either be an idiot, or he was telling others that he had a powerful life-saving technique. "How long until the mystery realm opens?" he asked. "A little over a year." "Alright, I agree." Ling Han nodded. A smile blossomed on Lin Yuqi's face, and she said, "You're a smart person. Big Sister knows that you'll definitely agree. In half a year, we'll set off for the headquarters of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. You should make some preparations." "Okay." Ling Han nodded. "As for Xinyan, you should go and see her. If she can improve further, we'll also be able to obtain more slots. Also, come back tomorrow. Big Sister wants to properly train you." Chapter 1368. Ling Han sighed and said, "I know, but this is far from enough." Hey, are you bragging?" Lin Yuqi's expression was filled with shock, and she actually forgot to tease Ling Han. "What bragging?" Ling Han was astonished. "You're saying that you've already mastered all the characteristics of 400,000 godly medicines?" Lin Yuqi emphasized. Ling Han gave an "oh" in his mind. Although he had spent close to 200 years familiarizing himself with godly medicines, Only half a year had passed in the outside world. Mastering 400,000 godly medicines in half a year was astonishing. However, he had already said it, so he couldn't take it back. Thus, he simply nodded. "You're either bragging, or you're a true prodigy," Lin Yuqi concluded. Han Xinyan said, "I started studying the characteristics of medicinal plants when I was 8 years old, and I haven't stopped for a single day in the past 106,000 years. However, I've only mastered 270,000 medicinal plants. This is already enough for me to be called a prodigy." Ling Han was astonished. What kind of brain does she have? Mastering 270,000 medicinal plants in 100,000 years? Hang on, how could the Treasure Forest Pavilion nurture mediocre people? Moreover, Han Xinyan's talent in alchemy was indeed extraordinary. He had witnessed this with his own eyes. This couldn't be because of Han Xinyan, but because of him. He was too freakish. He could be called an emperor in alchemy, and he also possessed exceptional talent in identifying medicinal plants. He could only assume so. "Let me test you." Lin Yuqi casually pulled out a medicinal plant and asked, "What is this?" "Blazing Sun Heart Lotus," Ling Han immediately replied after a single glance. Lin Yuqi used the same trick again and sliced this godly medicine into pieces. Then she said, "Piece it back together." Ling Han casually waved his hand, and these pieces danced in the air. His hands moved as if they were flying, and he used his origin power to reassemble the pieces. The outline of a godly lotus soon appeared, and then it became more and more plump, and finally completely formed. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan both examined it carefully, and expressions of astonishment quickly appeared on their faces. Indeed, there wasn't a single mistake. Again, Lin Yuqi pulled out a few more godly medicines and continued to test Ling Han. There were some that Ling Han didn't recognize, and he directly skipped over them. However, as long as he recognized them, he would be able to quickly and completely spell them out without missing a single detail. There was a strange light in Lin Yuqi's eyes. She only knew that Ling Han was very impressive when it came to refining alchemical pills. However, she hadn't expected that he was even more talented when it came to identifying medicinal ingredients. She had really picked up a treasure this time. She turned around and released her own rules to block Ling Han's senses. When she turned around, there was already a handful of medicinal herb fragments in her hand, and they were all mixed together. "How many types of medicinal herb fragments are there in total? What are they?" she asked. This clearly raised the level of the test. Ling Han identified them one by one, blurting out the names of the herbs one by one. In the end, there were only 3 that he didn't name. He moved the fragments to the side and said, "These must be the ones that I haven't learned yet." Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan were already stunned into a daze. They were both in this line of work, so they had naturally learned how to identify medicinal ingredients. However, even if they could identify all of the medicinal ingredients, their speed couldn't possibly be this fast. This guy seemed to have completely imprinted each and every medicinal ingredient in his mind, and he had an extremely detailed grasp of every single detail. Otherwise, some medicinal ingredients were actually very similar in appearance, and it would be very difficult to identify them just from a single fragment. This was also the area where mistakes were most likely to occur. However, Ling Han didn't have any problems in this area. One had to realize that Lin Yuqi had purposefully added 10 medicinal ingredients with similar details, yet Ling Han hadn't made a single mistake. This time, the difficulty is slightly higher. Lin Yuqi pulled out 100 medicinal ingredients that Ling Han recognized. She then chopped them up, mixed them up, and placed them on the table. "Piece them together." Ling Han smiled faintly and waved a hand to sweep all of the medicinal ingredients into the air. Then he swept his gaze over them, and his eyeballs trembled slightly. He had already memorized all of the medicinal ingredients that he had seen. His brain began to work at high speed, and he quickly pieced all of the medicinal ingredients together from nothing. He was indeed very talented in this area. In the past, when he had been in the lower realm, he would be able to completely memorize all of the medicinal ingredients that he had seen once. However, he wasn't as demanding as he was now. He even had to piece them together after chopping them up. As his cultivation level became higher and higher, his divine sense also became stronger and stronger. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to simultaneously simulate the recovery of 100 medicinal ingredients in his mind. One had to realize that there were far more than 1 million medicinal ingredients in his mind. He had cultivated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and the strength and tenacity of his divine sense had surpassed his cultivation level. Moreover, it was also extremely detailed, which gave him even more confidence. The medicinal ingredients continued to be pieced together, and they became more and more complete. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan's beautiful eyes widened more and more, and even their small mouths involuntarily gaped. This was especially so for Lin Yuqi, who actually stretched out her small tongue to lick her lips. Even when she was shocked, she would instinctively lick him, as expected of a bewitching beauty. It wasn't long before Ling Han stopped. He had already completed his task. "You're a freak." Lin Yuqi retracted her gaze and exhaled deeply. There was a brilliant light in her eyes. Ling Han's smooth and fluid movements were extremely pleasing to the eye, and even her heart was stirred by his actions. Meanwhile, Han Xinyan couldn't hide her admiration and said, "I'll have to spend at least 10 million years before I can reach this level. Brat, marry into our Lin clan." Lin Yuqi's eyes lit up and she said, "How about it? How about we betroth Xinyan to you?" "And you?" Han Xinyan instantly jumped up, her face flushing red. Ling Han laughed and said, "Madam, you must be joking." Seeing Ling Han tactfully refuse, Han Xinyan's expression changed slightly. This woman was just this strange. It was fine if she refused, but she would feel uncomfortable when she was rejected by others. "What do you dislike about me?" Lin Yuqi's eyes were like silk, and she inched closer to Ling Han. Her fragrance wafted through the air, and it was extremely alluring. She smiled sweetly and said, "Little brother, don't you like women who are more mature? Like me? And you?" Han Xinyan hurriedly tried to pull this bewitching woman away. This was too outrageous. She had just promoted her, and now she was going to sell herself. How embarrassing. "Your chest is small, so you don't have the right to speak." Lin Yuqi pushed Han Xinyan to the side. Then, she puffed out her chest as if to demonstrate her dominance. Her breasts were indeed astonishing, and they were full and impressive. They were extremely beautiful. Ling Han merely smiled and said, "I already have a wife. If Madam wants to marry into the Ling clan, you can only be the 22nd concubine." "Isn't it the 19th? Lin Yuqi laughed wildly, and she didn't mind at all that her breasts were surging and giving Ling Han some advantage. Ling Han didn't look away, and he said, "Someone as dissolute as me must have married a few more concubines in the past half a year." Han Xinyan didn't know whether he was telling the truth or not, and she couldn't help but feel disdain in her heart. Ling Han's talent in alchemy was so high, yet his character was so terrible. Would he be able to handle 22 wives? When she thought of this, she couldn't help but blush. What did this have to do with her? Chapter 1369. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan completely believed in Ling Han's ability to appraise medicinal ingredients, so they didn't test Ling Han further. Instead, they began to explain the details of the clan competition to him so that he could prepare. Just like Lin Yuqi's previous test, the clan competition was probably like this as well. Every participant had to go through 4 tests, which were respectively identifying medicinal ingredients, combining medicinal ingredients, identifying medicinal ingredients, and finally pill refinement. The 4 tests would all be graded according to the results, but the proportion of each test was different. For example, the first test only had 10% of the score, while the pill refinement test had 50%. Thus, the most important test was still the level of pill refinement. This was also the key to becoming an alchemist, their most fundamental ability. The carriage sped, and 13 days later, they arrived at Azure Rain City. This was the headquarters of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and the ancestral grounds of the Lin, Shi, Han, and Huang clans were all located in this city. However, the Treasure Forest Pavilion was famous for its alchemy prowess, and it gave others the impression that it was rich and powerful. In reality, however, the Treasure Forest Pavilion's martial art wasn't weak, and the 4 clans all had eternal river tier elites. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to protect such a massive amount of wealth. However, the exact number of eternal river tier elites in the 4 clans, and how high they had reached, was a secret. On the surface, there were only 20 or so eternal river tier elites on the Cloud Apex planet. However, as Ling Han learned more and more, he became convinced that this was definitely not the true number. Rather, it was far too few. 20 or so elites at the consummate level of the Eternal River tier were more like it. Azure Rain City was the holy land of alchemy, and carts of alchemical pills would be transported from here to various cities of the 2 imperial empires every day. Of course, Azure Rain City wasn't far from the Blue Cloud Imperial Empire, and the Treasure Forest Pavilion had established their headquarters here because of this convenience. Almost every clan here did alchemy-related business. Even if they weren't alchemists, they could be medicine farmers or medicine collectors. This formed a complete and massive industry chain. The Treasure Forest Pavilion had a history of over 1 billion years on the Cloud Apex planet. During this time, they had even experienced the destruction of one imperial empire and the rise of another. However, they weren't affected in the slightest, and they were still earning large amounts of true origin stones. After all, no matter who was in charge, cultivation was inseparable from medicinal pills. Moreover, it was rumored that the rise of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire was also supported by the Treasure Forest Pavilion. The Treasure Forest Pavilion had provided them with a large sum of true origin stones. Otherwise, the old Imperial Empire might not have collapsed so suddenly. After so many years of development, the 4 great clans had produced huge branches. Furthermore, after several powerful branches had usurped the main branch, the 4 great clans no longer had a main branch. Whichever branch was stronger would have the right to speak. Life was full of ups and downs. Right now, the person in charge of the Lin family was the Northern Sand Branch. He had been in this position for more than 9 million years. This was because the Northern Sand Branch had a level 16 alchemist who could suppress the other 99 branches. Lin Yuqi belonged to the Anyuan branch, which was one of the weakest branches of the Lin clan. The strongest alchemist in the Anyuan branch was only level 13, and his cultivation level had just advanced into the Eternal River tier. Thus, a prodigy like Lin Yuqi had long since grasped a considerable amount of right to speak. Previously, she had gone to Big Trade City to search for reinforcements. She hoped to obtain a good ranking in this competition and send more clansmen into the ancient mystery realm. This was a great opportunity that could change the fate of an entire clan. Otherwise, if the Anyuan branch continued to decline like this, it would one day be eliminated from the Lin clan. In fact, there were more than 100 branches of the Lin clan. However, only the strongest 100 branches had the right to leave their names in the Lin clan. Meanwhile, the weaker branches would be eliminated by the stronger ones. This was an unchanging rule. Because the Anyuan branch wasn't powerful, even the places that Ling Han and the others lived in were a little shabby, old, and small. They weren't like the top few branches, where any random courtyard was larger than the 3 of them. Moreover, the other branches all had 10 participants. This was the upper limit, but there was no lower limit. However, the Anyuan branch only had 2 participants, Ling Han and Han Xinyan. It was clear how poor this branch was. Most importantly, the 2 of them were reinforcements. There wasn't even a single participant from the Anyuan branch. Lin Yuqi could also be considered a prodigy, but most of her talent was in martial art. Although she was also extraordinary in identifying medicinal ingredients, she wasn't good at alchemy. However, alchemy was the most important thing in the competition. If one didn't know how to refine pills, it was destined that they wouldn't be able to obtain a good result. After settling down, Ling Han immediately entered into the Black Tower. Right now, he was extremely interested in grasping the special characteristics of medicinal ingredients. There was a loud sound, and the doors of the courtyard they lived in were kicked open. A group of 5 people appeared. One of them was a middle-aged man. He was tall and sturdy, and didn't care about his appearance. His upper body was bare, and the black hair on his chest fluttered in the wind. It was a little too exuberant. Behind him were 4 youths, 3 men and 1 woman. All of them were brimming with arrogance, as if they were proud sons and daughters of the heavens. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan were chatting in the living room, and they immediately leaped out when they heard the commotion. When the doors were kicked open, they couldn't help but grimace. "Lin Feng, what's wrong with you?" Lin Yuqi shouted at the middle-aged man. Her seductive eyes swept over his thick chest hair, and a look of disgust involuntarily appeared on her face. These 5 people were naturally members of the Lin clan. They belonged to the Hengyun branch, and they were powerful enough to rank in the top 10 of the 100 branches. The middle-aged man was called Lin Feng, and he was the guardian of the Hengyun branch. He was at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier. Lin Feng stared at Lin Yuqi's voluptuous chest with a greedy look in his eyes. He had once visited the Anyuan branch a few thousand years ago, and he had met Lin Yuqi by chance. At that time, his heart had been moved by this seductive beauty. He had proposed to her, but Lin Yuqi wasn't interested in him. Moreover, he was afraid that she was in the main branch of the Anyuan branch, so he didn't dare to act rashly. However, he had led a team to participate in the clan tournament this time, and when he found out that Lin Yuqi had also come here, he couldn't help but run over. "Yuqi, your Anyuan branch is destined to decline," Lin Feng said with a serious expression. "Why do you want to stay with that clan that has no future? Why don't you and I get married? Our Hengyun branch is one of the top 10 branches, and we have countless cultivation resources. You should know that this is the best choice." However, it was a pity that as he said this, his perverted eyes swept over Lin Yuqi's face, chest, and thighs incessantly. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a pervert. "Even if my Anyuan branch declines, it has nothing to do with you," Lin Yuqi said in annoyance. She pointed at the doors and said, "Scram. Why do you have to do this?" Lin Feng was extremely thick-skinned. Lin Yuqi had rejected him before, so he naturally didn't expect her to accept him this time. "There are still 3 days before the tournament. Why don't we let these kids warm up and spar?" He chuckled coldly in his mind. This time, he had come to deal a heavy blow to Lin Yuqi. Chapter 1370. Lin Yuqi's pretty face was filled with anger. She wasn't afraid of sparring, but Lin Feng had broken down the door and trampled on her head. How could this be considered sparring? "If you want to spar, we can do it in 3 days. Now get out," she said impatiently. Lin Feng laughed loudly and said, "Then I'll take it that you've admitted defeat. The Anyuan branch is a bunch of trash and cowards," a young man in a green robe from the Hengyun branch sneered. Brother Xiefeng, trash is indeed not bad, but he's not a coward. He doesn't have a cock down there," another young man said. He was dressed in a green robe, and there was a pill cauldron embroidered on his back. Jianya is right." The other 2 clapped their hands arrogantly. They didn't take Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan seriously at all. Han Xinyan trembled in anger, and was about to step forward to spar with these 4 people. However, Lin Yuqi reached out to stop her. This kind of spar was meaningless. They were clearly here to humiliate them. She said menacingly, "If you can't control the mouths of those mad dogs, don't blame me for being merciless." Lin Feng shrugged and said, "Yuqi, you're too domineering. You won't even allow us to speak the truth? Moreover, this is a matter of the Hengyun branch. What right does the Anyuan branch have to interfere?" "She's not bad." Lin Jianye stared at Han Xinyan for a while. "She's qualified to be my servant." She's a servant, right?" Lin Xiefeng said wickedly. "It's just that her breasts are too small." Lin Jianye purposely made a kneading motion, which was extremely vulgar. Han Xinyan's body was trembling with rage, and Lin Yuqi's gaze was also ice-cold. She suddenly lashed out with a palm, and a large hand of origin power materialized. This hand slapped Lin Jianye across the face. Lin Jianye spat out a mouthful of blood and 4 broken teeth. His hair was disheveled, and he looked extremely disheveled. A smug smile appeared on Lin Feng's face. However, his expression became stern, and he said, "Lin Yuqi, as a senior, what is the meaning of bullying a junior? As such, I can only teach you a lesson." He had purposely used these juniors to provoke Lin Yuqi so that she would attack. That way, he would have a good reason to attack. "You had attacked my junior, so I had to apprehend you. No matter how you put it, he was in the right. Moreover, after he had done with Lin Yuqi, all he had to do was insist that Lin Yuqi had intentionally slandered him. After all, both sides had their own arguments. In any case, perhaps Lin Yuqi would submit to him after he fucked her a few more times. Firstly, women were definitely at a disadvantage in this aspect. Secondly, this woman was one of them. As long as he had his fill of her, would she still be disobedient? He directly made a move, stretching out his hand. 2 stars appeared, emitting a terrifying aura. He was going to finish off Lin Yuqi as quickly as possible. Otherwise, if he were to stare at this seductive beauty for too long, he would feel like his blood was about to spurt out of his nostrils. Upon hearing this, Lin Yuqi knew that she had been tricked. But this wasn't a conspiracy, it was an open conspiracy. People have already humiliated you in the face, and you can still endure it? However, he couldn't help but fall into the trap. She scolded and waved her sleeves. An infinite amount of heavenly light bloomed and welcomed Lin Feng's giant hand. The two of them clashed, and the shock waves instantly swept out, raising the entire courtyard to the ground. Fortunately, this was the ancestral land of the Lin clan, which was protected by powerful formations. Otherwise, the entire Azure Rain City would have been obliterated by this attack. Lin Yuqi, let's fight in the sky. Lin Feng roared. Although there were formations protecting this place, if they attacked with their full power, they would still cause massive damage. He only wanted to obtain a woman, not to destroy the ancestral land of the Lin clan. At this moment, Lin Yuqi was like an arrow knocked on a bowstring. She had no choice but to attack. She immediately gritted her teeth and charged into the sky with Lin Feng. The two of them continued to exchange blows, flying further and further away. Soon, they had become a small dot in the sky. Han Xinyan was extremely anxious. Lin Feng was at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier, while Lin Yuqi was at the low extreme. The two of them were on completely different levels. Even if Lin Yuqi was a 2-star genius, she couldn't make up for this gap. She immediately thought of Ling Han. Although Ling Han was only at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, if he joined forces with Lin Yuqi, they would definitely be able to turn the situation around. Flat-chested beauty, where do you think you're going? Lin Jianye and the others spread out and surrounded Han Xinyan, not giving her a chance to go out and inform them. They naturally didn't know that the reinforcements that Han Xinyan wanted to call for were actually in the ruins. Han Xinyan was astonished. Why hadn't Ling Han appeared yet? They had all been pressed down firmly. Han Xinyan frowned and asked, "What do you guys want?" "What?" Lin Jianye couldn't help but laugh loudly. He shook his head and said, "Little beauty, you're far too unreserved. The first thing you say is whether we want to do it or not. How flirtatious." Han Xinyan's face instantly paled. She clenched her fists and said, "Don't you have any shame?" He was the one who spoke just then. "What does it have to do with us?" The woman from the Hengyun branch said. "Moreover, you're the one seducing men, and you're asking others if they want to be shameless? I've never seen anyone as flirtatious as you. I wouldn't dare to marry such a woman. However, I don't mind playing with her." A perverted look appeared on Lin Xiefeng's face. Although Han Xinyan's chest was a little small, her appearance was extremely beautiful. His heart throbbed with excitement. The reason why they were so daring was simple. The Anyuan branch was too weak. The weak were prey to the strong, and the strong were revered. This was a principle even within the Lin clan. It was precisely because of this that the Lin clan could prosper with each generation. Of course, these people had definitely gone too far. They were bullying the other branches in the ancestral grounds. However, they were the Hengyun branch, and they were one of the top 10 branches of the Lin clan. As long as they didn't kill anyone, who could criticize them? Moreover, they were only taking advantage of Lin Xiefeng with their words. It wasn't like they had actually done anything. Han Xinyan couldn't take this humiliation anymore. She immediately drew her sword and charged toward the 4 people. She wasn't weak, and with a sweep of her sword, she forced Lin Xiefeng and the others into a retreat. However, the 4 people were also very powerful. After regaining their footing, they immediately launched a counterattack. Although the four major clans of the Treasure Forest Pavilion mainly focused on alchemy, martial art was also very important. After all, without the support of a high level of martial art, it was impossible to refine high-grade alchemical pills. Lin Xiefeng and the others were even more outstanding. They were at least one-star geniuses. In a situation where their cultivation levels were similar, none of them were weaker than Han Xinyan. Moreover, the four of them were working together. It wasn't long before Han Xinyan found herself in a difficult situation. She could only defend herself. The four people were intentionally humiliating her. None of their attacks were fatal, nor were they serious. However, Han Xinyan's clothes were continuously torn, revealing her snow-white skin. Her hair was also incredibly disheveled. They didn't dare to kill her. Right now, everyone was participating in the clan competition. If news spread that they had killed a participant, they wouldn't have to pay with their lives. At the very least, their cultivation would be crippled. That would be no different from death. However, even if they wanted to humiliate her, what could she do? Han Xinyan's eyes were spitting fire. Suddenly, a look of determination flashed across her face, and she actually slashed her sword toward her own neck. She couldn't take this humiliation, so she was fighting with her life. If she was forced to death by the four people of the Hinyun branch, they wouldn't have an easy time either. Reading on a cell phone. Chapter 1372. Lin Feng suddenly turned around, only to see that a young man had appeared behind him at some point, looking at him with a disdainful expression. Heavenly body tier with a flying body, what a young guy, definitely not older than 500 years old. Lin Feng was dumbfounded. As Ling Han's cultivation level increased, it became more difficult to accurately determine his age. He needed to increase his cultivation level correspondingly, so Lin Feng could only estimate that Ling Han's age was within 500 years. However, this was enough to stun him to the max 500 years old. Even in the Lin clan, which had an endless supply of alchemical pills, the fastest person to reach the heavenly body tier would be at least 100,000 years old, and that was already a prodigy, not to mention the fact that they had endless fortuitous encounters. It wasn't as simple as just taking alchemical pills. Breaking through the barrier of cultivation level wasn't something that could be accomplished with just alchemical pills. It required comprehension, and comprehension required time, which could easily be measured in tens of thousands of years. Thus, a 500-year-old heavenly body tier elite was terrifying. However, overwhelmed by lust, he couldn't be bothered to be shocked. He only wanted to chase Ling Han away, and then consummate his relationship with Lin Yuqi. "Fuck off," he shouted. "I don't have this habit, I don't know how to fuck off," Ling Han said calmly, but his eyes were rippling with fury. He was the Alchemy Emperor, so he only needed to sense slightly to know that this place was filled with the scent of medicinal pills that could greatly increase one's lust. Obviously, the other had used a dirty trick, which made him incredibly furious. In a hostile state, there was no difference between a man and a woman. There was only one word: kill. However, no matter how hostile they were, Ling Han disdained to use such methods. Shameless to the extreme. "You deserve to die," Ling Han said, killing intent surging in his eyes. He suddenly threw a punch at Lin Feng. This was a punch that was infused with heaven's might, and it was like divine punishment, incredibly terrifying. Lin Feng was astonished. It was clearly an attack from a cultivator at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, so why did it feel like heaven and earth was punishing him? There was a hint of heavenly tribulation. He only had time to raise his arms in front of him to protect himself, and this punch had already reached him. Ping, he was sent flying. He couldn't help but be shocked. He raised his hand, and saw that there was already an obvious dent on his arm. That was a bone that had been broken by Ling Han. What a terrifying fist strength. "Who exactly are you?" Lin Feng stared at Ling Han as he circulated his essence force. His arms immediately began to heal. This wasn't because of his amazing regenerative ability, but because he had forcefully used elemental energy to flatten and connect his broken bones. Once his elemental energy was withdrawn, his broken bones would still be broken bones. "Ling Han, take me with you." Lin Yuqi couldn't hold on any longer. Her eyes were like silk, and her jade-like skin was glowing with a crimson luster. Lin Feng rolled his eyes and immediately came up with an idea. He said, "Young man, I believe you also have feelings for this slut. I can give her to you. However, after we're done, she must belong to me. How about it?" "Don't worry, her mind has already been eroded by the 10 enchantment fragrance that I refined. She will only crave men more and more. As long as she has one, she won't even mind wild beasts. After you've had your fun, I'll clean up the mess for you. I definitely won't reveal your secret." As he spoke, he approached Ling Han. He suddenly spat out his golden core and inhaled. His strength instantly increased tenfold, and he raised his fist and punched toward Ling Han. I've been plotting for several thousand years, so how could I give this piece of fat meat to you?" He had only said those words to confuse Ling Han. He was sure that any man would fall for this trick. With such an enticement placed in front of them, who wouldn't be tempted? However, after he punched out, his heart tightened. This was because Ling Han's expression was calm, and in fact, frighteningly cold. So this medicinal effect is so powerful. And you've also absorbed quite a bit of it. Going by this, you should also be the type who will sleep with any female you see, regardless of whether they're beautiful or ugly, human or beast. Ling Han unleashed heaven's might, instantly reducing Lin Feng's cultivation by 2 stars. He punched out to meet Lin Feng's punch. After spitting out his golden core, Lin Feng's strength was just barely close to the high extreme, but now that it had been reduced by 2 stars, he was only left with the strength of less than the late stage of the medium extreme, which was about the same as Ling Han's. Thus, he was forcibly sent flying in the collision of their fists. Meanwhile, Ling Han only took a few steps back before stabilizing his figure. Lin Feng was stunned. Was this really the low extreme? How could it be so terrifying? Furthermore, what did Ling Han mean by his words? An ominous feeling welled up in his heart. Ling Han charged out, unleashing all kinds of secret techniques. Under the effects of Tide of the Ages, Lin Feng's attacks were completely ineffective. After a few moves, he was captured by Ling Han. However, Ling Han didn't kill him. Instead, he stimulated the medicinal effect in Lin Feng's body to work even faster. Roar, roar, roar. Lin Feng's eyes were bloodshot, and they exuded a terrifying thirst as he stared fixedly at Lin Yuqi. "What are you thinking?" Scram. Ling Han casually tossed Lin Feng away. Lin Feng landed in a forest. He also sealed the majority of Lin Feng's power, so it was impossible for him to fly back up. However, the medicinal effect in Lin Feng's body had already taken effect. His eyes were bloodshot, and he began to chase after the wild beasts in the forest. Instantly, the wild beasts here were extremely unlucky, and they were crazily pounced on by him. Moreover, the medicinal effect was too terrifying. How could one time be enough? The wild beasts all ran for their lives, fleeing for their lives. Ling Han laughed loudly. This was called karma, and he had to suffer the consequences of his own actions. Killing a member of the Lin clan in the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan was obviously not allowed. Thus, this was the best punishment for Lin Feng. It wouldn't be too late to kill him if he encountered him again in the future. "Little brother, give it to me." Lin Yuqi clung onto him. There was still a sliver of clarity in her eyes, but most of it was filled with intense thirst. "I'll give it to you, big sister accepts." "You accept, but I don't." Ling Han slapped Lin Yuqi, knocking her unconscious. Then he picked her up and left. However, the medicinal effect wasn't over just by knocking her unconscious. If he didn't get rid of her desire, she would only burn herself to ashes. Ling Han's speed was extremely fast, and he returned to the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan in a short while. With a flick of his hand, he tossed Lin Yuqi to Han Xinyan. Lin Yuqi was already completely under the control of the medicinal effect. She let out heart-wrenching moans, and her slender body writhed endlessly like a beautiful white snake. "What's wrong with Aunt Yu?" Lin Yuqi was shocked. "She's taken medicine," Ling Han said in annoyance. "Take her into the house and help her deal with it." Han Xinyan's mouth gaped open. How was she supposed to deal with this? Was she supposed to use the legendary mirror polishing technique? Do you want me to sacrifice myself? Ling Han glared at her. Pervert. Han Xinyan's face reddened, and she hurriedly brought Lin Yuqi to another courtyard. She couldn't really allow Lin Yuqi to lose her virginity, right? After a while, the unbearable meowing of cats rang out from within the house, and it wouldn't stop no matter what. Emptiness is form. Form is emptiness. Ling Han stood guard outside, muttering to himself. He could easily guess what was going on inside. This caused his heart to beat wildly, and he almost couldn't control himself. After a full day and night, the irritating meowing of the cats finally stopped. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan came out, their beautiful faces still flushed red. Chapter 1373. Han Xinyan's face was flushed red. She was too shy to see Ling Han. Lin Yuqi didn't care at all. She even winked at Ling Han and said, "Little Han, how could you miss such a good opportunity? Are you really a man?" Although she was smiling, there was a strong sense of defiance in her eyes. Previously, when Ling Han kept her at arm's length, she could think that Ling Han was playing hard to get. It could be said that his methods were brilliant, and his willpower was exceptional. However, she was poisoned, and even proactively begged for sex, yet Ling Han still rejected her. She couldn't tolerate this. When did her charm become so bad? She couldn't even charm a mere man. If she had only been teasing Ling Han before, then now she was truly filled with a strong fighting spirit. She definitely had to subdue this man in front of her, and make him sing, conquer, in front of her. Ling Han only smiled, and didn't pay her any attention. "Little lover, you still rejected Big Sister in that kind of situation. That's a massive humiliation to Big Sister," Lin Yuqi said softly by Ling Han's ear. Her breath smelled like orchids, and she continued, "Thus, Big Sister has decided to never forgive you in this lifetime." Ling Han couldn't help but shiver. She didn't have to be so cruel, right? Forget it, he'd better stay far away from this bewitching woman in the future. There was a vinegar jar in the Lin clan, and just thinking about it, he knew that Empress Luanxing would definitely be his second. Azure Rain City was only so big, and the Lin clan's territory was even more limited. Lin Feng and the others had caused such a ruckus here, and they'd even flattened the courtyard. With such a huge commotion, it naturally couldn't be hidden. Thus, in just a few days, everyone heard that Lin Xiefeng and the others had been stripped naked and hung up. Everyone could still laugh about this. However, after hearing about Lin Feng's suffering, their faces twitched, and their hair stood on end. Who asked him to topple a mountain of wild beasts? Regardless of gender, as long as there were holes on their bodies, they couldn't escape his clutches. Just how thirsty was he? There was no lack of high-grade alchemists here, and they quickly deduced that Lin Feng had been poisoned, and the culprit was himself. When the news spread, there was an uproar. What kind of taste did he have to feed himself an aphrodisiac and then do that to all the wild beasts in his body? All of a sudden, Lin Feng became a freak among freaks. No one dared to approach him. This person could even lay his hands on wild beasts, so wouldn't he be even more thirsty for humans? It was said that even the servants in Lin Feng's residence were scared out of their wits. For a long period of time, the Cyan Rain City used Lin Feng as an oath. "If I violate anything, let Lin Feng enter my room at night." It was enough to show how widespread and influential this matter was. Of course, Lin Feng didn't have the face to stay any longer. Everyone, including Lin Xiefeng and the others, left the Azure Rain City on the same day. Fortunately, the Hengyun branch had a lot of people. There were a total of 10 people participating in the competition, and Lin Feng was only one of the protectors. There was another protector leading 6 young geniuses. Thus, it was not as if they didn't even have people participating in the competition. Because of that, the Hengyun branch naturally hated Ling Han and the others to the bone, viewing them as mortal enemies. They did not reflect on the fact that it was all Lin Feng's fault. The reason was very simple. The Hengyun branch was powerful, while the Anyuan mountain range was far too weak. 3 days quickly passed, and it was time for the Lin clan to hold a competition to determine the number of people who could enter into the ancient mystery realm. This mystery realm was called the Medicine King's Cave by the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and it had a total of 9 levels. Each level was a vast and boundless world. The 100 branches appeared at the same time, and each branch could send a maximum of 10 people to participate in the competition. Their scores would be recorded, but only the 2 with the best scores would be chosen for the final ranking. Then, how many people from each branch could enter into the Medicine King's cave would be decided. Let's first undergo the Bone Age test. The Beisha branch, which was in charge of the ancestral land, had a highly respected elder presiding over this competition. His name was Lin Exin, and although he was only at the heavenly body tier, he had already lived for over 30 million years. He was definitely an old antique. Everyone underwent the Bone Age test. This not only allowed them to know their absolute age, but it also allowed them to calculate their relative age based on their cultivation level. Otherwise, if they randomly found someone to impersonate, then the competition would be meaningless. Because the relative age had to be below 30, the participants were all in their prime. However, not all of them were handsome or beautiful. In fact, there were even a few who were disabled, yet they were still able to stand here. The Anyuan branch was weak, and even the Bone Age test was ranked very low. Fortunately, the speed of the test was very fast, so they didn't have to wait too long. Suddenly, there was a huge commotion in the crowd, and exclamations of shock rang out. 724 years old? There's actually a 700-year-old Sun-Moon tier cultivator. Heavens, did he eat the meat of a true dragon? His cultivation level has skyrocketed. That's not the most terrifying thing. His name is Lin Yang, and it's said that he's a level 8 alchemist. Pooh, is that true? Of course it's true. Ling Han also walked over. It was a youth who looked to be only 18 or 19 years old. His appearance was very delicate, and he even looked a little shy. However, his true age was already over 700 years old. He had probably been either cultivating or refining pills these past few years, and that was why he had maintained his shy appearance. Sure enough, alchemy clans had more young elites. This was their foundation. Not long after, exclamations of shock rang out again. Another top-notch prodigy had appeared. He was slightly older, at 1,500 years old, but his cultivation level was even higher. He had reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, and he was also a level 8 alchemist. This person was called Lin Bedeo, and he was tall and burly. He was clearly very young, yet his appearance was definitely that of a middle-aged man in his 30s. He appeared extremely tough. It was said that he was even more talented in martial art, and he was a 4-star genius. He was known as the Low Extreme Saber. Then a red-robed young woman appeared, and the entire crowd erupted. This was a prodigy of the Beisha branch, and her name was Lin Shuang. She was only 200 years old, and she had only reached the Sun-Moon tier a few years ago. However, she was already a level 8 alchemist. Theoretically speaking, this was impossible. How could high-level pill recipes be so easy to grasp? However, it was said that this young woman was extremely mystical. She possessed a portion of the memories of a certain ancestor of the Lin clan, and possessed astonishing alchemy knowledge at birth. This was why she was able to grasp a large number of level 8 pill recipes right after reaching the Sun-Moon tier. In fact, if it weren't for the limitations of her cultivation level, she could even refine level 9 alchemical pills. Ling Han nodded. This was most likely not a reincarnation. A reincarnation soul flower would only appear once every 10 billion years in the immortal realm. Even saints might not be able to obtain one, to say nothing of a branch of the Lin clan. Not all branches had sent their own members. Some were like the Anyuan branch, and there were no outstanding prodigies in their clans. Thus, they could only invite external help, such as the Shueyue branch. The external help they invited was called Zhang Feng, and he was already over 500,000 years old. He had been famous for a long time, yet his cultivation level had already reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. He fulfilled the conditions that his absolute age was less than 1 million years, and his relative age was less than 30 years. This person was also a level 8 alchemist, and he had immersed himself in alchemy for hundreds of thousands of years. Finally, it was Ling Han's turn. Chapter 1374. A good story. The test for bone age was a special formation that could penetrate flesh and reach the skeleton. Ling Han stood on it. Wang, the formation activated, but his bone age didn't appear. What's going on? Is the formation broken? The people in charge of the formation asked curiously. Normally, when a person stood on it, the formation would activate, and his bone age would naturally appear, so why was there no reaction? Don't use your origin power to resist. One person immediately reprimanded. If an elite used their origin power, they could stop the formation from invading and naturally cause the formation to lose its effect. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Do you think I used my origin power?" That person was only in the mountain river tier, so how could he detect if a heavenly body tier elite used his origin power? He could only ask for help from the higher-ups of his clan. Lin Xen walked over and swept his gaze over Ling Han and couldn't help but look surprised. This was actually a heavenly body tier elite. A super elite of the heavenly body tier actually walked out under 1,000,000 years old. This is a heavenly body tier elite, show some respect. He shouted at that person. No matter where, heavenly body tier elites could be called elites, and any force would be willing to recruit them. That person was given a fright and hurriedly apologized to Ling Han. Because Ling Han had restrained his aura, unless they were also in the heavenly body tier, it was impossible to determine his cultivation level. At most, they would feel that he was slightly unfathomable. Ling Han smiled and said, "No matter." The formation activated again, but still couldn't detect Ling Han's bone age. Lin Xen was confused at first, and then showed an expression of shock. Previously, if elites used their origin power, they could prevent the formation from invading, and thus prevent the bone age from appearing. However, he could determine that Ling Han didn't use his origin power, and he was confident of this. However, the formation still couldn't detect Ling Han's bone age. What did this mean? This guy's physique was freakishly strong, and thus had an effect similar to an origin power shield. Moreover, this was a passive existence and didn't need to be activated at all, which made it a few times more terrifying. The old man waved his hand and said, "There's no need to test him. I can guarantee that this person's age is below 500 years old." The crowd burst into an uproar when they heard what he said. 500 years old previously, there had been a 700-year-old Sun-Moon tier elite, a 2,000-year-old Sun-Moon tier elite, and an even more terrifying Lin Shuang. She had advanced to the Sun-Moon tier at only 200 years of age. This was already extremely astonishing. But now, heavenly body tier elites under 500 years old? Holy shit, seriously? It was said that the heavenly body tier was a threshold, a dividing line between elites. Only by taking this step would cultivators be able to fly with their physical bodies and truly roam this world without being bound by the regulations. No matter what, the heavenly body tier was a milestone, and there was a saying that one could not break through until they were 1,000,000 years old. This was a bit of an exaggeration. Many geniuses could surpass this age limit, but definitely not as exaggerated as Ling Han. A 500-year-old heavenly body tier elite. No, it was a heavenly body tier below 500 years old. That could be 400 years old, or 300 years old. The lower the value, the more monstrous Ling Han was. It was too terrifying. More importantly, he had actually participated in this competition. What did this mean? Ling Han also had considerable achievements in alchemy. Otherwise, even a Genesis tier elite wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand according to the regulations. Gasp, was there really such a terrifying person in this world? Ling Han smiled at Lin Xen. Although there was still a large gap between their cultivation levels, they were both at the heavenly body tier, after all. Thus, they could just barely be considered as equals. Meanwhile, there was an intense light in Lin Xen's eyes as he looked at Ling Han. Even if he was an idiot in alchemy, there was still a need to recruit such a prodigy into the main branch. With Ling Han's talent in martial art, coupled with their alchemical pills, it was extremely likely that Ling Han would be able to reach the Eternal River tier within 10,000 years. At that time, the Beisha branch would have another Eternal River tier elite, and their status would become even more stable. Although the four major clans were all established through alchemy, Without the support of powerful martial prowess, even the most powerful alchemist would only become a money-making tool for others. In this world, martial prowess was the most important. Recruit him at all costs, Lin Xian said in his mind. However, since he had such thoughts, how could others not see Ling Han's value? They all secretly plotted their own schemes. They definitely couldn't miss out on such a prodigy. In any case, Ling Han was an honorary elder of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He wasn't a member of the Anyuan branch, so anyone could recruit him, right? Lin Yuqi wasn't nervous at all. One had to realize that she had tried to entice Ling Han, yet he was completely unmoved. Who in the Lin clan could be more feminine than her? In terms of beauty, she was the best. In terms of charm, she was even more alluring. In terms of cultivation level, she had already advanced to the heavenly body tier. How many people could compare to her? With all three combined, any man should be head over heels in love with her. Thus, beauty traps were ineffective against Ling Han. In terms of wealth, although the Anyuan branch was weak, they had countless years of accumulation after all. It wasn't like they couldn't afford it. She was extremely confident. Ling Han returned to his original spot. As he walked, he instantly attracted countless gazes. Previously, he had concealed his aura, so no one knew that he was a heavenly body tier elite. Naturally, no one paid attention to him. However, at this moment, it was as if a halo had appeared around him, making him eye-catching and dazzling. In particular, beautiful women were all gazing at him with tender affection. In this world, strength was the most important thing. Moreover, Ling Han was still so young, and his future prospects were limitless. Lin Shuang's eyes lit up. She had a very high opinion of herself, and believed that there was no man in this world that was worthy of her. However, her heart had received a heavy blow at this moment. A figure had forcibly barged into her heart. Next, let's begin the first round of competition. Identifying medicinal ingredients, Lin Xian said. All of the participants were in position. Those from the same branch were separated to avoid any chance of cheating. There was a table in front of Ling Han, and there was a sack on the table. This sack was sealed with a divine pattern, and if one tried to forcefully probe into the sack with their divine sense, the seal would shatter. When this candle is lit, you can open the sack and begin identifying the medicinal ingredients. When the candle is lit, you can tabulate the results. The person who correctly identified the most medicinal ingredients will be in first place, and they will receive 100 points, Lin Xian said calmly. However, his voice was clearly heard by everyone. After saying this, he nodded at someone beside him, and that person immediately lit a candle. Instantly, everyone sprang into action, and they opened the seal on the sack on the table. This was a spatial spirit tool, and it was only half the height of a person. However, the space within it was extremely vast. The medicinal ingredients were poured out one by one, and everyone began to identify them one by one. They wrote down the names of the medicinal ingredients on a small piece of paper, and then stuck the paper onto the medicinal ingredients. This process was repeated continuously. In order to identify as many medicinal ingredients as possible, if they encountered something they didn't recognize or didn't have a good grasp of, they would directly set it aside to avoid wasting time. The surroundings were extremely quiet, and the only sound was the faint sound of taking and putting down medicinal ingredients. Chapter 1376. Although Lin Shuang had taken first place in the first round, Ling Han had been the most dazzling of them all. After everyone's rankings had been determined, the second round of the competition began. It was still the identification of medicinal ingredients, but the difficulty had been increased. They had to identify medicinal ingredients that were mixed together. They had to cut up a large number of medicinal ingredients and mix them together. This had to be done a total of 30 times, and each time, roughly 200 medicinal ingredients were mixed together. Ling Han was still the fastest to answer the questions. However, he was only able to identify 400,000 basic medicinal ingredients, which was only half of them. As such, his answers were only half correct. Of course, this wasn't very accurate. However, in terms of the speed at which he answered the questions, he was more than twice as fast as Lin Shuang. This showed just how terrifyingly talented he was when it came to identifying medicinal ingredients. After answering the questions 30 times, Ling Han's results weren't the best, but he still managed to squeeze into the top 10. After all, there was still a time limit. If the time limit was extended, Ling Han would probably drop out of the top 100. This time, Lin Shuang was still in first place. She obtained another 100 points for the Beisha branch, bringing her total score to 200 points. The second place went to Lin Bideo. Who would have thought that he would be so meticulous despite his boorish appearance? As expected, one couldn't judge a book by its cover. Ling Han had obtained 97 points in the first round, and 91 points in the second round. His total score wasn't low either. Han Xinyan's score was much lower. She had obtained 11 points in the first round and 14 points in the second round. Her total score was only 25 points. The third round was the combination of medicinal ingredients. It wasn't just one medicinal ingredient. Instead, it was several hundred medicinal ingredients mixed together. Ling Han was still the fastest. However, his old problem remained. This time, he was ranked 8th and had obtained 92 points. Lin Shuang was still in first place. She had obtained first place in all 3 rounds. Lin Yuqi was extremely confident. Even though Lin Shuang had already won 3 rounds in a row, the weight of the points from the 4 rounds was different. The 4th round was the most important round, and it took up 50% of the points. Thus, as long as Ling Han obtained first place in the 4th round, and Lin Shuang performed slightly worse in this round, Ling Han would be able to catch up and clinch first place. Just thinking about it made her excited. She couldn't help but feel her delicate body heat up. She really wanted to be embraced by that man, fiercely kiss her lips, and ravage her proud peaks. Pay, she hurriedly stuck out her tongue. How could she be so infatuated with a man? Was she poisoned? After the 3rd round of competition, everyone had half a day to rest. Alchemy required full concentration, and there was no room for carelessness. Let's begin. Lin Xan was still the host. It was up to each person to decide what kind of pill they wanted to concoct. However, the final ranking was determined by the grade of the pill they had to concoct. If the grade was the same, the difficulty of concocting would be determined. If the difficulty was the same, then the quality would be determined. For example, if they were both level 8 alchemical pills, the Berserk Blood Spirit pill would definitely be able to crush everything else. This was a saintly medicine in the Sun Moon tier, and only level 9 alchemical pills could surpass it. Ling Han's eyes swept over the participants. Aside from him, no one else here had reached the heavenly body tier. Then, theoretically, no one could concoct a level 9 divine pill. Of course, there might be exceptions. For example, because Ling Han had reached the pinnacle level and cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, his divine sense was powerful, and he could just barely concoct a level 9 alchemical pill when he was at the peak stage of the Sun Moon tier. However, there shouldn't be such a freak here. Ling Han didn't force himself to concoct a level 9 alchemical pill because he hadn't tried it yet. Thus, he chose to concoct the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. In any case, this would definitely help him take first place. Boom, the cauldron's flames soared into the sky. Some people decided to take a gamble in this round because of their poor results in the previous rounds, and chose to concoct an alchemical pill that was beyond their abilities. The result was naturally an explosion of the cauldron. There was only one chance, and if they failed, it would be over. The majority of people were only level 5 or level 6 alchemists. Thus, they only used 2 or 3 days to finish concocting the alchemical pill. After 5 days, there were only about 100 people still concocting the alchemical pill. After 10 days, this number had dropped to 9 people. As long as these 9 people could successfully concoct the alchemical pill, they would definitely be in the top 9. This was very simple. The higher the level of the alchemical pill, the longer it would take to concoct it. Unfortunately, on the 12th day, someone's cauldron still exploded, and all their previous efforts were wasted. He was so remorseful that he almost vomited 3 liters of blood and fainted. Half a month later, the remaining 8 people finished concocting the alchemical pill. They were all brimming with confidence, and they believed that the alchemical pill they had concocted would definitely bring them first place. From the time they had concocted the alchemical pill, it could be determined that the alchemical pill they had concocted was all level 8. Lin Bedeo has successfully concocted the entering void pill, Lin Xan announced. 3 people instantly looked dejected when they heard this. They couldn't compare, they were all alchemists, so they naturally knew which alchemical pill was easy to concoct and which was difficult to concoct. Even if there were no judges, they only needed to look at the alchemical pill that others had concocted to know whether they had won or lost. However, Lin Shuang, Lin Yang, and Zhang Feng's expressions didn't change. It was clear that they were still extremely confident. Lin Yang has successfully concocted the Dark Yin pill. Lin Bedeo and Lin Yang glanced at each other. Their gazes were as sharp as swords, and it was clear that they wanted to compete with each other. The difficulty of concocting these 2 types of alchemical pills was about the same. Thus, the final victor would depend on the quality of the alchemical pill. Zhang Feng has successfully concocted the Raging Flame True pill. Zhang Feng smiled faintly. The Raging Flame True pill, the Entering Void pill, and the Dark Yin pill were all at the same level of difficulty. In terms of quality, he had immersed himself in alchemy for 500,000 years. How could he possibly lose to a few brats? Lin Shuang has successfully concocted the Shadowed Heaven pill. Boom! A single stone caused 1,000 ripples. Everyone was shocked. That was the Shadowed Sky pill. The difficulty of refining it was several times higher than the Underworld Yin pill. Lin Shuang smiled proudly. Just as she had predicted before the competition, she had clinched first place in all 4 segments. She was the undisputed champion. Finally, Lin Xen looked at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and opened the lid of his cauldron. Instantly, a blood-colored speck of light shot out from the cauldron at an incredible speed. Lin Xian's eyes and hands were quick, and he immediately caught the speck of light. An expression of shock instantly appeared on his face. This alchemical pill actually possessed the ability to communicate with its own spirit. All alchemists knew that alchemical pills had to reach level 10 before they could communicate with their own spirit. Below level 10, if an alchemical pill could communicate with its own spirit, then it would definitely be a saint medicine. Just what kind of alchemical pill is this? The nearby elderly alchemists all gathered around, their brows furrowed in astonishment. Berserk, blood spirit pill. Someone exclaimed in astonishment. Although this alchemical pill had been lost for a long time, there were still some pills that had been preserved. These pills were known as Little Saint Medicines. It really is the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. Heavens! Being able to concoct the Berserk Blood Spirit pill means that this person's alchemy skills have already reached level 9. He can be called a Grandmaster. Just like in martial art, becoming a level 9 alchemist was a bottleneck that was incredibly difficult to cross. Among high-tier alchemists, only alchemists at level 9 or above were worthy of the title of Grandmaster. They all looked at Ling Han, their eyes burning with passion. Reading on a mobile phone. Chapter 1377. Too shocking, a quasi-level 9 alchemist under 500 years old. Although Lin Shuang was only 200 years old, if she couldn't break through to the heavenly body tier within 300 years, she wouldn't be able to become a level 9 alchemist. Thus, she naturally wouldn't be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ling Han. Even now, no one knew Ling Han's true age. If they knew that he wasn't even 50 years old, they would definitely be so shocked that their scalps would go numb. The first place goes to Ling Han, Lin Xian announced. There was no doubt about this, nor was there any objection. Who would dare to say that the alchemical pill they refined could surpass the Berserk Blood Spirit pill? However, Lin Shuang had placed first in the first 3 rounds, and she had placed second in the final round as well. Thus, even though pill concocting was the most important part of the competition, she still managed to obtain first place. Ling Han had to settle for second place. However, no one believed that Ling Han was inferior to Lin Shuang. It was just that he was too young and hadn't fused with someone else's memories. Otherwise, with the monstrous talent he had displayed in the previous 3 rounds, he would definitely be able to advance further. Although Lin Yuqi was a little disappointed by this result, she was also very satisfied. That's enough. Second place. That was enough to win 99 spots for the Anyuan branch. After returning to their residence, Lin Yuqi immediately found it hard to contain her excitement, and she almost leaped into Ling Han's arms. She said, "Little handsome, we've succeeded. Aren't you going to give me a kiss?" She pouted her bright red lips, appearing extremely alluring. Seeing that Ling Han was unmoved, her charming eyes turned, and she suddenly pulled out her hand to slap herself. Pa! A crisp sound entered the ears, and her full buttocks swayed in circles, incomparably alluring. A goblin, a goblin. Andy! Han Xinyan was extremely embarrassed, and she hurriedly dragged Lin Yuqi away. Lin Yuqi was trying to put herself and Ling Han in the back, and now she was trying to make Ling Han her uncle. What was she trying to do? Ling Han, on the other hand, felt that he couldn't take it anymore. He wasn't a stubborn person, so his resistance was limited. He returned to his room and hurriedly entered into the Black Tower. He had a good time with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and only then did the image of Lin Yuqi's sexy and seductive figure disappear from his mind. It would be good to have Empress Luan Xing by his side in the future. This empress's charm was the greatest, and with a single glance from her, all other beauties were like weeds. After staying for another 3 days, Lin Yuqi couldn't help but urge Ling Han to set off. He had no choice but to leave. Each and every one of them came running over to poach him. It was as if as long as Ling Han agreed to join their branch, they could raise any conditions they wanted. For example, the Beisha branch had even proposed to betroth Lin Shuang to Ling Han, but the prerequisite was that Ling Han had to marry into their family. Although Lin Yuqi trusted in Ling Han's willpower, she was also worried that Ling Han wouldn't be able to hold on for too long. After all, 1 or 2 beauties might not be able to overcome her charm, but what about 10 or 100? It was better to leave as soon as possible. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan had to return to the Anyuan branch first. There was still half a year left, which wasn't a long time at all. They still had to select 99 suitable candidates. Of course, one of them would definitely be reserved for Ling Han. Ling Han and the 2 women agreed on a place to meet. After arriving there, he entered the Black Tower and continued to immerse himself in the world of medicinal ingredients, improving his ability to discern. Time trickled by, and half a year quickly passed. Ling Han finally left the Black Tower in satisfaction. He had completely comprehended 810,000 medicinal ingredients. Even if he were to chop up so many medicinal ingredients and mix them together, he would still be able to sort them out. Moreover, his speed was extremely fast. If they competed again now, he would undoubtedly take first place. Moreover, it would be a crushing victory. Another 3 days passed, and Lin Yuqi reappeared. This time, it wasn't just her and Han Xinyan alone. Rather, she had brought with her a very large team. After a quick count, including Ling Han, there were exactly 99 people. In other words, they were all candidates to enter the Medicine King's cave. On this trip, apart from Lin Yuqi, there was also a heavenly body tier elite. He didn't look to be even 30 years old, and his expression was extremely proud, as if he were the most cocky person in the world. "So you're Ling Han?" That person looked down on Ling Han, a sliver of disdain on his face. "Don't think that you can claim to be a meritorious servant just because you've won so many spots for the Anyuan branch. A servant is only a servant. Don't even think about ascending to the heavens." Fuck, is he retarded? Before Ling Han could say anything, he was pulled to the side by Lin Yuqi, and when he saw this, there was obvious displeasure on that person's face. "Who is this stupid bird?" Ling Han asked. "Don't take it to heart," Lin Yuqi hurriedly said. "His name is Lin Zihong, and he's the only son of our branch's patriarch. Although his talent in alchemy isn't very high, he's a genius in martial art. After cultivating for over 600,000 years, he's already reached the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier." Ling Han didn't think much of it. He was only in the medium extreme, and he could suppress him with a single hand. "I know you're powerful." Lin Yuqi gave him a sweet smile and said, "Don't lower yourself to his level. He's just jealous after hearing about your achievements." Ling Han humphed and said, "Are you sure he's just jealous of my achievements?" This person clearly had designs on Lin Yuqi, and now the bewitching woman was very close to him, so it was inevitable that he would be jealous. In truth, he was very wronged. In any case, just ignore him. Lin Yuqi put on the appearance of a little girl and said, "All right? Just take it as I'm begging you." Ling Han couldn't take it anymore, and directly left with a flick of his sleeve. He boarded the carriage. This was called out of sight, out of mind. Lin Yuqi smiled sweetly. Although Ling Han always looked like he disliked her, he still treated her as a friend. Otherwise, with his strength and temper, he would definitely have beaten Lin Zihong into a retard. This time, it wasn't a single carriage, but rather a group of carriages, carrying 99 people. The carriages swayed all the way, and once again arrived at the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan in Azure Rain City. The members of the 100 lineages were almost all here, and the lineage with the fewest number had only sent one person. It wasn't that they couldn't send more people, but that there was only one spot. Who asked them to obtain the lowest result? The Anyuan lineage, whose strength was originally at the bottom, actually obtained 99 spots this time. This naturally surprised many people, and Lin Zihong had a smug look on his face, as if this was all his credit. He continued to spread his tail like a peacock, extremely coquettish. However, no matter how coquettish he was, how many people were willing to pay attention to him? On the other hand, although Ling Han spent most of his time in his room, there was an endless stream of people coming to visit, causing Lin Zihong's eyes to turn red with jealousy. Isn't he just a minor alchemist? What's there to be proud about? Lin Zihong was jealous, unwilling to accept that his limelight had been snatched away. Seventh uncle, let this brat be arrogant for now. When we enter the Medicine King's cave a few days later, we can just find a chance to secretly kill him, a lackey suggested to him. Lin Zihong's eyes shifted, and he said, "That's right. I can use the excuse of splitting up to obtain more fated opportunities to add that guy into my team, and then find a chance to kill him." That's right, seventh uncle, you are in the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier, while that guy is only in the low extreme, and is only in the early stage at that. He is completely not worth mentioning, the lackey said obsequiously. You even dare to have designs on the woman in my team. You are seeking your own death, Lin Zihong said darkly. Chapter 1378. A long, long time ago, Azure Rain City was actually a mountain range with no signs of human habitation. Later, the 4 major clans settled here, and after countless years of development, this holy land of alchemy was finally formed, a place that countless alchemists yearned for. The reason for this was because the entrance to the Medicine King's cave was located here. Moreover, it was precisely to conceal this base of the Treasure Forest Pavilion that the Azure Rain City had been built. Who would have thought that there was an entrance to an ancient mystery realm hidden beneath this city? Ling Han and Zhang Feng were both asked to swear a Dao oath that they wouldn't tell anyone the secret of the Medicine King's cave. Otherwise, they wouldn't be allowed to enter. Afterward, several powerful figures appeared. They were all Eternal River tier elites, and they used precious tools to open the entrance to the Medicine King's cave. Countless years ago, the ancestors of the 4 major clans had obtained the key to open the Ghost King's cave, and that was how the Treasure Forest Pavilion came to be. The passageway appeared, and it was a revolving door of light. Only those who met the requirements could enter, or they would be rejected. At least Eternal River tier elites couldn't force their way in. From this, it could be seen that the master of the Ghost King's cave was at least at the Genesis tier. Considering that the inheritance of the Ghost King's cave was all alchemical pills, this master was at least a level 17 Saint Alchemist. His inheritance was naturally precious. Of course, it wasn't just the Lin clan this time. The other 3 major clans of the Treasure Forest Pavilion also entered. According to the rules of the 4 major clans, the Han clan would enter first, followed by the Lin clan, and then the Shi clan and Huang clan. When it was the Lin clan's turn, they entered in batches. The first batch was naturally the Beisha branch. They were the first batch this time, and the second batch was the Anyuan branch, led by Lin Zihong. His expression was filled with arrogance, as if the entire world was groveling before him. Xiao, Ling Han felt a tearing sensation in his body, and then he arrived at another place. This was a brand new world, and the air was filled with the fragrance of medicine. The first level of the Medicine King's cave. Looking around, there were many hills, and there were medicinal herbs planted everywhere on the hills. He could see many people walking back and forth in the medicinal fields, carefully caring for them. There were actually people here? Ling Han immediately shook his head. When he activated the Eye of Truth, he had to take a closer look. Those were not humans, but rather puppets. However, their forms were considerably realistic, and at first glance, there was really no difference between them and humans. The Medicine King's cave has 9 floors. Each floor has peerless great medicines, but they are extremely difficult to harvest. Lin Yuqi appeared, and she explained to Ling Han, "It's precisely because of these protective puppets. Since we can only come here once every 100,000 years, we have to rely on them to take care of the medicine fields, so we definitely can't destroy them. Therefore, it is extremely difficult to harvest the godly medicine without harming them." Ling Han nodded. If he could wipe out all of these puppets, it would be much easier to gather the medicinal herbs. But that would be like draining the pond to catch the fish. Could it be that he would stop gathering the medicinal herbs in the future just for this one time? The 4 great clans had given strict orders not to destroy the medicine-protecting puppets. This was a very wise and far-sighted decision. However, we've only been able to reach the 8th level at most. No one has ever been able to enter the 9th level, Lin Yuqi said. Judging from the situation on the previous 8 levels, there must be a saintly medicine recipe on the 9th level. When it reached the 17th level, the medicinal pill could be called a sacred medicine. Yuqi, in order to increase efficiency, let's each lead a team and travel separately. Lin Zihong immediately suggested. He had already endured for quite a while, and didn't want to think of that hateful guy, Ling Han. Lin Yuqi was more than happy to do so, so she immediately nodded and agreed. "You, come with me," Lin Zihong said as he pointed at Ling Han. "No." Lin Yuqi hurriedly jumped out. "He's my man, so he has to travel with me." Lin Zihong couldn't help but be enraged. Oh, he had only gone out for a short while, and he already had her man. He humphed and said, "Don't forget, before we set off, the clan chief personally said that I would be the leader on this trip." Lin Yuqi shook her head internally. She naturally knew what Lin Zihong was planning, and she had spoken up to stop him because she wanted to save Lin Zihong. Lin Zihong didn't know that Ling Han had easily defeated even Lin Feng, and Lin Feng's strength was definitely not inferior to Lin Zihong's. "Who I travel with is my business," Ling Han said calmly. His tone was calm as he said, "I am only an honorary elder, and none of you can control me. Since we've already entered this place, let's split the loot." After saying this, he directly leaped forward, using the star-plucking step. He was as fast as lightning. Out of respect for Lin Yuqi, he once again spared Lin Zihong. However, if Lin Zihong still didn't know what was good for him, he would definitely be merciless. Lin Yuqi couldn't help but sigh in her heart. It should be known that Ling Han's battle prowess was also astonishingly high. With him, their gains would definitely increase greatly. However, who told Lin Zihong to be so petty? This was fine as well. At least this way, there would be no more conflicts. "Coward!" Lin Zihong sneered. Since Ling Han had run away, there was no point in splitting into groups anymore. However, how could Lin Yuqi be willing to agree? In any case, he was the one who said that they would split up. In the end, they still split up. Lin Shuang's group hadn't gone far, and when she saw this, a smug smile involuntarily appeared on her face. She didn't mind taking advantage of the situation and capturing Ling Han. With these words, she hurriedly chased after Ling Han. However, how fast was Ling Han? Moreover, she had only just advanced to the Sun-Moon tier, so how could she possibly catch up to him? In the blink of an eye, she had already lost track of Ling Han. At the same time, Ling Han was traveling alone. As he flew, he swept his eyes over the medicinal field below. If it were ordinary godly medicines, he wouldn't even bother to waste his time to harvest them. There was a large amount of medicinal ingredients in the Black Tower anyway. After traveling for about half a day, he suddenly stopped. A tree that was about 30 meters tall appeared in front of him. Its entire body was sparkling and translucent like jade, and it was purplish-red in color. Its canopy was open like an umbrella, and it was filled with beauty. Of course, its unique appearance wasn't what stopped Ling Han. Rather, it was because this was a rare level 10 divine tree. Purple Jade 9 Paths Tree. This kind of divine tree was extremely unique. At the first 1 million years, it would blossom and bear fruit, but its fruit could only be regarded as a level 2 medicinal ingredient. After that, it would blossom and bear fruit after 2 million years, and its fruit could be regarded as a level 3 godly medicine. After that, it would reach level 4 after 4 million years, level 5 after 8 million years, and finally level 10 after 200 million years. At each stage, the color of the Purple Jade 9 Paths tree would be different. Only after blossoming 9 times would it turn purplish-red. After that, it would blossom and bear fruit once every 200 million years. There would be a total of 9 times, and after 9 times, the tree would wither. This was why it was called the Purple Jade 9 Paths tree. A rank 10 god tree would naturally bear rank 10 god fruits. The fruits on the tree were slightly unripe, and it would probably take at least a few million years for them to ripen. However, to Ling Han, uprooting and planting them into the Black Tower was the way to go. Thankfully, I left alone. Otherwise, if that bewitching woman knew that I was going to uproot the tree, she would definitely try to stop me. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face. This Medicine King's cave was discovered by the Treasure Forest Pavilion, not theirs. Thus, it's not unreasonable for me to take it. Reading on a cell phone was more refreshing. Chapter 1380. The gloomy-looking man was full of confidence. He felt that he was not far from obtaining this divine sword. His forehead was covered with sweat. This was an evenly matched battle, and he had to use his full strength to gain a slight upper hand. However, although it was exhausting, he was filled with pride. Only this kind of divine sword was worthy of him. He roared loudly, his aura suddenly soaring, wanting to subdue the divine demon sword with a burst of pressure. Sure enough, the divine demon sword's aura fell further, and he completely gained the upper hand. He was overjoyed and was just about to pull out the divine sword, but an irresistible force burst forth. Peng, he was instantly sent flying, landing on his butt. What? The man's mouth was half open, appearing to be in disbelief. How could this be? Wasn't he about to succeed? Why did the divine sword rebound? With a ding, the divine sword flew up automatically, hovering in the air, exuding a divine light. It was not very bright, but it was filled with boundless majesty. As if there was an invisible hand pulling it, the divine demon sword slowly floated toward the man. This divine sword automatically recognized its master. The man couldn't help but be excited. Just now, being knocked away by the divine demon sword made him realize that this divine sword's value far exceeded his expectations, and now it actually recognized its master. Didn't this mean that it recognized his sword Dao? If not, how could it recognize its master? He was extremely excited and couldn't help but stretch out his hand, wanting to grab it. In the instant that his fingers were about to touch the hilt, shwa, the divine demon sword swept out, slicing a hole in his palm, and then suddenly turned around, flying with a buzz above Ling Han's head before stopping. The sword vibrated lightly, as if it was the great Tao that had existed for eternity. The man's expression was filled with astonishment and then intense bitterness. As an elite of the sword Tao, and more so a sword fanatic, how could he not understand at this time that this divine sword was playing with him? A divine weapon playing with people, what did this mean? The sword already had a spirit. He couldn't help but feel even more delighted, but he also knew how difficult it was to make a spiritual sword recognize a person. This would definitely not happen before Ling Han died. Swords were the most loyal. The man stared at the divine demon sword, his eyes filled with envy, and said, "This is a good sword." "I know." Ling Han nodded. "Treat her well, don't let her be covered in dust." His focused expression made it seem as if the divine demon sword wasn't a sword, but rather his beloved daughter. Now that she was marrying off to a faraway place, he couldn't bear to part with her. Goosebumps rose all over Ling Han's body. "This is too mushy, isn't it?" No wonder he couldn't become a swordsman. He couldn't be so focused. There were too many things that he had to distract himself with. There were girls, alchemy, fist techniques, and all sorts of secret techniques that took up a lot of his time. In fact, cultivating his sword techniques only took up a very small portion of his time. The man sighed and left silently. He didn't even leave his name behind. Ling Han shook his head and soared into the air, heading towards the last area of this floor. It was a palace that guarded the entrance to the second floor. In order to enter the second floor, one must first pass the test in the palace, and the content was the same as the previous family competition. Whether it was to identify medicinal herbs or concoct pills, it was not certain. The supreme great herb of this floor was also in that palace. It was just that no one had been able to retrieve it for a long time. How fast was the heavenly body tier? Moreover, he was heading straight for his destination this time. Thus, it only took 15 minutes for Ling Han to descend. A gigantic palace appeared in front of him, with the words, Grand Sun Palace, written on the door. These words weren't very good, but they were filled with energy and exuded a majestic aura. It was as majestic as the sea, and there was an indescribable aura circulating around it. Ling Han couldn't help but take a second look at it. At this moment, many people from the 4 major clans had already arrived. They all entered the palace and began to take the test. There was no time limit on the first floor. However, as long as one entered the palace to take the test, everything would be fine if they succeeded. However, if they failed, an hourglass would appear above their heads. When the hourglass emptied, they would be expelled. If they succeeded, an hourglass would also appear. This represented the time they could stay in the second floor. The better their results, the longer they could stay in the second floor. What would they do when their time was up? They would continue to take the test on the second floor and earn the right to enter the third floor. Thus, the higher their results on each floor, the better. Only then would they have enough time to sweep through the next floor and obtain more godly medicines. The reason why no one had entered the 9th floor yet was because no one had enough time to come to the palace on the 8th floor. They didn't even have the chance to take the test, so how could they enter the 9th floor? Ling Han wasn't in a hurry. Right now, he hadn't encountered a time limit. Thus, he stood there and observed the words, Grand Sun Palace. He stood there for 3 days and 3 nights. Then, the origin power in his body suddenly surged. It was as if he had sensed something. His only star was spinning rapidly in his dantian. With every revolution, his star would expand a little, and the 3 words Grand Sun Palace would dim a little. This change was extremely subtle, and even heavenly body tier elites would have to pay close attention. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to detect it. The crowd entered, completely ignoring the fact that there was still a person standing there. Everyone wanted to pass the test of the first floor and enter the second floor to harvest godly medicines. Moreover, if their results were good, they could even obtain the pill recipe as a reward. Ling Han was engrossed in his observation when he suddenly felt his body jolt. It was as if someone had bumped into him, forcibly pulling him out of this mysterious state. He couldn't help but frown, and an expression of displeasure appeared on his face. Ever since he had resonated with the Grand Sun Palace, his cultivation level had increased by a large margin in just the time it took for an incense stick to burn. If advancing from the early stage of the low extreme to the middle stage of the low extreme was equivalent to 100 steps, then he had already advanced more than 50 steps. All 50 steps had been taken in the time it took for an incense stick to burn. His previous arduous cultivation could be said to have made very little progress. Correspondingly, the 3 words, Grand Sun Palace, also appeared to have dimmed by half. Moreover, the mysterious power within the words had been drawn out by Ling Han through resonance, and it was still continuously dissipating. It didn't stop just because Ling Han had exited this state. To Ling Han, this was naturally a huge waste. Thus, he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to it. He continued to stare at the 3 words, using his divine sense as a bridge to guide the mysterious power. Humph, you blocked my path and bumped into me, yet you still want to pretend that nothing happened? There was an extremely arrogant young man behind Ling Han. There was even a hint of anger and embarrassment on his face. He was the person who had bumped into Ling Han. Previously, he had noticed that Ling Han was standing there. However, due to his natural arrogance, he didn't dodge or give way. Instead, he continued to advance in a straight line. In his mind, it was only natural that others would give way to him. If someone dared to refuse, he would directly flatten them. Ling Han had fallen into that special state, so it was naturally impossible for him to step aside. Thus, he also bumped into Ling Han without any hesitation. He wanted to give Ling Han a taste of his own medicine. However, he didn't expect to bump into an iron plate. This wasn't a metaphor. This was the truth, and it was very blunt. He had clearly been prepared for this, and had purposefully bumped into Ling Han. However, the result was that he was knocked back and landed on his bottom. How could he not be furious? Chapter 1381. This person's name was Huang Peng, and he was a member of the Huang clan of the four great clans. He had advanced to the Sun Moon tier at a young age, so he was naturally extremely proud. Ling Han ignored him. His attention was completely focused on the three words, Grand Sun Palace. A supreme power had been sealed within the words by a great elite, and he could actually increase his cultivation level when he resonated with the words. Perhaps this great elite had only written these three words casually, but he was far too powerful, so he naturally left behind a wisp of power that was enough to raise Ling Han's cultivation level by a subminor level. Was this a Genesis tier? Ling Han didn't think too much about it. Right now, he only wanted to snatch this power away. Everything else could be left for later. Huang Peng was furious. Ling Han's mind had actually wandered off again. Just how much was he looking down on him? A vicious glint flashed across his eyes, and a divine sword appeared in his hand. With a swing, he slashed at Ling Han's arm. After all, they were both members of the four great clans, so he didn't dare to kill them. Slicing off one of Ling Han's arms could be considered a warning. In any case, immortals were powerful, so losing an arm wouldn't be a problem. He could naturally regrow it after a few months of rest. Ding! Huang Peng's sword slashed down, and sparks flew into the air. The sword actually bounced back, unable to wound Ling Han in the slightest. Huang Peng was stunned. What kind of physique was this? His defenses were far too astonishing. However, he immediately realized that Ling Han had definitely done this on purpose. He appeared to be distracted, but in reality he was completely focused. He had filled his entire body with origin power, and that was how he had managed to block the strike. How despicable! The people in the surroundings couldn't help but look astonished. They wondered what was wrong with Ling Han. He had already been struck by a sword, yet he still hadn't reacted at all. Huang Peng flew into a rage out of humiliation, and he slashed his sword repeatedly at Ling Han. Ding 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 ding. Sparks flew everywhere, but Ling Han was even more godly than godly metal. No matter how Huang Peng slashed at him, he remained unharmed. This caused the surrounding people to be amused and curious. Ling Han's physical strength was too shocking. Hearing the laughter of the people around him, and seeing the mocking looks in their eyes, Huang Peng felt hot blood rush to his head. Instantly his killing intent blazed. How could he still care about the friendship between the four great clans? The tip of his sword pierced straight towards Ling Han's eyes. No matter what, the eyes were definitely the weakest part of the body. No matter how strong one's physique was, there would definitely be a weak point. However, if it pierced through the eyes, as long as it penetrated a little deeper, the person's sea of consciousness would definitely explode. That would be life-threatening. Huang Peng didn't care. He just wanted Ling Han to die. Stop! With a loud shout, a ray of sword light shot out and blocked Huang Peng's sword. Han Dong, you dare meddle in my business? Huang Peng raised his eyebrows. The newcomer was none other than the gloomy sword fanatic from before. His true identity was the rising star of the Han clan, and his name was Han Dong. With a desolate expression, he said, "You're actually using a noble sword to launch a sneak attack? You're not worthy of using a sword." Huang Peng snorted and said, "Sword fanatic, is this brat part of your Han clan? Hurry up and make him apologize." "You think you're worthy?" Han Dong icily said, his face filled with disdain. "Good, all of you dare to look down on me? Do you think I'm easy to bully?" Huang Peng struck out with his sword. Han Dong, how many years has it been since we last fought? Han Dong revealed a solemn expression. Although he didn't respect Huang Peng's character, he didn't dare underestimate his strength. He also struck out with his sword. It's been almost 300 years. Then let's fight again. Huang Peng's sword swept out, merging with the four suns and moons. Sword Qi transformed into a blood-colored tiger that charged at Han Dong. Han Dong naturally wasn't afraid, and the two of them immediately began fighting. Ling Han's consciousness wandered as he greedily absorbed the mysterious power within the three words. This was his only chance. Who among the people who had come here before had bothered to take a second look at the door plaque? That was why this massive benefit had fallen into his lap. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, his body finally shuddered, and he awoke. The origin power in his body surged like a tsunami, and it was more than 10 times stronger than before. Middle stage of the low extreme. Not letting him down, his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. At this moment, the scenes around him were imprinted into his mind again. He could see the intense battle between Han Dong and Huang Peng. Both of them were using swords, and they were currently engaged in a heated battle. The two of them were fighting fiercely, and their attacks were all lethal and merciless. Ling Han's consciousness had wandered away just then. However, he hadn't missed a single thing that had happened. It was just that he had isolated these scenes from his mind, and now that his mind had returned, these scenes flashed through his mind like lightning. His index finger involuntarily twitched, and a sliver of killing intent appeared on his face. You bumped into me first, and not only did you not apologize, you actually flew into a rage out of humiliation and wanted to injure and kill me. What's the point of letting scum like you live? However, this Han Dong is also quite interesting. Ling Han suddenly moved. A terrifying aura surged and forcibly separated Han Dong and Huang Peng. This was a heavenly body tier crushing a sun-moon tier elite, so it was naturally a piece of cake. Ling Han smiled at Han Dong and said, "I'll teach you a sword technique. Watch carefully. Who do you think you are? You actually dare to meddle in other people's business." Huang Peng roared in anger. He was extremely displeased. Ling Han ignored him. He simply used his fingers as a sword and then unleashed the lightning sword technique. Shwa! The sword swept past, and Huang Peng's body was instantly sliced in two. The power of heaven's might wreaked havoc, and his body instantly exploded. Only a wisp of his divine sense escaped. Why you actually dared to destroy my physical body? Huang Peng was incredibly shocked and furious. Even if he could possess someone else's body, it was impossible for his soul and physical body to be 100% compatible. This was equivalent to erasing his path of martial art. Ling Han's gaze was as sharp as a sword, and he glanced coldly at Huang Peng's divine sense, saying, "Don't make me regret not killing you." Even Huang Peng's soul trembled with this gaze. He didn't even dare to utter a single word, and he hurriedly fled as if he were fleeing for his life. Ling Han dispersed his killing intent. Although he hadn't destroyed Huang Peng's divine sense, he had left behind a wisp of sword intent. This sword intent would erupt in 3 years, and at that time, Huang Peng would still be unable to escape death. The reason why he hadn't killed Huang Peng on the spot was because this was the territory of the 4 great clans, after all. Even if no elites could enter now, he would still have to leave. He couldn't be too ruthless. In this way, although the Huang clan would definitely erupt in fury, Huang Peng was in the wrong first, so the Huang clan wouldn't have the face to provoke him. However, it was a different story if he died. Han Dong was still pondering over Ling Han's sword. After a long time, he finally said, "I've only come into contact with less than a 10,000th of the sword intent." His face was filled with fanaticism. That sword was too powerful, and it was completely different from the current sword Dao. It had opened up a completely different path. Ling Han smiled as he demonstrated the lightning sword technique once again. At his level, he naturally didn't care too much about the form. What mattered was the concept. It was impossible for Han Dong to comprehend the might of the heavenly tribulation. What Ling Han wanted to teach him was the way to break the rules. As expected, this person wasn't stupid. 3 days later, He half knelt before Ling Han and respectfully bowed. He didn't enter the palace, but turned around and left. With this harvest, this trip was already complete. He wanted to go back and enter seclusion to comprehend the sword intent. Chapter 1382. This could also be considered fate. It was rare for him to encounter a sword maniac. Among Ling Han's 6 disciples, Kong Xiuyuan and Yun Yong Wang had both learned alchemy from him. Martial art only focused on cultivation level. Their battle prowess was trash compared to those at the same cultivation level. This was a bad influence from his last life. Chen Ruijing used a saber, while Jiang Yefeng used many different techniques. He used everything, but he was not proficient in anything. He was very similar to Ling Han in his last life. As for the 2 disciples he had taken in this life, Ding Ping was more proficient in close-quarters combat because of his explosive strength. He used his fists to solve problems. Although Jiu Yao hadn't taught him much, he was extremely talented and could summon demonic beasts. Thus, his path definitely wasn't the sword Dao. Thus, Ling Han couldn't find anyone to pass on his lightning sword technique to. Now that Han Dong was completely focused on the sword, and there was also karma between them, Ling Han decided to pass on a portion of the profound meaning of the lightning sword technique to him. Of course, apart from Ling Han, there was basically no one else in this world that could completely grasp the lightning sword technique. First of all, could one calmly observe the heavenly tribulation? Just this one step was enough to eliminate everyone. Ling Han took a deep breath and strode into the Grand Sun Palace. At this moment, if someone was paying attention, they would discover that although the 3 words were still grand, they seemed to have lost a certain charm. Middle stage of the low extreme. Awesome. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. If he cultivated on his own, even if he had an endless supply of alchemical pills to consume, it would take him at least 100 years to accumulate this much. But now, less than half a day had passed. If he was still not satisfied, then he would be too greedy. He couldn't help but feel even more expectant. Would the remaining 8 palaces also be able to obtain such benefits? This made him excited, and his footsteps quickened slightly. There weren't many furnishings in the palace. It was actually designed to be hollow. Rather than calling it a palace, it would be more appropriate to call it a large-scale garden. There was a stalk of grass growing in the center. It was obviously a stalk of grass, yet it was 300 meters tall. It was completely green, and there was a small fruit growing at the top. It was only the size of a soybean, and was completely disproportionate to its massive size. Ling Han, on the other hand, immediately revealed a shocked expression. Right now, he was already in control of 810,000 basic godly medicines in the immortal realm. Even if there were new goods, they were derived from 810,000 medicinal ingredients. He could trace back to the source and deduce the medicinal properties of the new quality. And the stock in front of him was a level 20 divine medicine. Divine medicines that reached the 17th level could be called sacred, and those that reached the 20th level were sacred king great medicines. If one ate this fruit, would it allow a mortal to ascend to the heavens in a single step and directly become a Genesis tier cultivator? Although this kind of Genesis tier cultivator's battle prowess would definitely be the weakest among those at the same cultivation level, it would definitely be a piece of cake for them to suppress beings below the level of saints. Without mentioning anything else, just the 3 words of Sage King Great Medicine were enough to make people restless. But for hundreds of millions of years, this great medicine had remained here. Firstly, it hadn't matured, and secondly, it was definitely difficult to harvest. Ling Han had to be careful. It wasn't a puppet that was protecting this stalk of sage medicine, but a formation. He couldn't solve it. It was too complicated. He had a feeling that this was a peerless killing formation. If he tried to break it, he would definitely be mercilessly attacked. With his current strength, he would definitely die. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, he summoned Notionless Saint again. Brat, I'm warning you. If you dare to interrupt my cultivation again, Notionless Saint was grumbling. This brat was really too unscrupulous, throwing him out every few days to block disaster. However, when he saw this stalk of godly medicine in front of him, he immediately looked stunned and exclaimed, "Heavenly origin Tao fruit." Ling Han was surprised and asked, "Senior, you also recognize this stalk of godly medicine?" He had only learned about it after reading through all the illustrated handbooks of godly medicines in the world. Nonsense. As a saint, I naturally know all the godly medicines in the world like the back of my hand, notionless saint said in disdain. He actually dared to doubt the judgment of a saint? He was really underestimating him too much. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Then does Senior have a way to solve this formation? As long as we transplant it into the Black Tower, we can eat godly medicines like rice in the future." This was naturally an exaggeration, but it was extremely possible that they could harvest a godly medicine every few million years. This was already very, very astonishing. The notionless saint didn't answer Ling Han. Instead, he stared at the formation. After a short while, cold sweat beaded on his forehead, and he involuntarily shuddered. "A supreme killing formation. A supreme killing formation," he exclaimed. "Can it be broken?" Ling Han hurriedly asked. He also knew that this was a super killing formation, so how could it be broken? "It can't be broken." Notionless Saint shook his head and said, "We can only barge through it. However, with the might of this killing formation, I'm afraid that even Saint Kings could be killed." He was extremely conflicted as he said this. This meant that they could only stare at this stalk of godly medicine. Even Saint Kings could be killed, so the number of people who could break through this formation and harvest this godly medicine could really be counted on one's fingers. Not only did they have to become Saint Kings, but they also had to have outstanding battle prowess. Perhaps they had to be 6-star, 8-star, or even 10-star geniuses. Ling Han pondered for a moment. Since he didn't have the ability to harvest this godly medicine at the moment, there was no need to worry about it. It was better to focus his energy on other things. With a wave of his hand, he drew Notionless Saint into the Black Tower. This saint had to be extremely depressed. After all, he had once belonged to the strongest group in the world, yet now he was at Ling Han's beck and call and was treated like a babysitter. Ling Han circled around this godly medicine and arrived at the back half of the palace. There was a passageway in front of him, and at the end of it was the second level of the Medicine King's cave. There were no guards, and it was just an empty passageway. However, no matter how many people walked in, they would soon disappear. It was incredibly strange. Ling Han strode forward. He observed carefully, but before he knew it, the people in front of him had disappeared, and when he took a few more steps, the sound of footsteps behind him had also disappeared. He had become all alone. The scene changed, and he appeared in a stone room. There was a stone table in front of him, and there was only an hourglass on it. However, it wasn't moving. Random test, identify medicinal ingredients. A cold voice sounded, and there was not the slightest bit of emotion. Within the time limit, the more medicinal ingredients you identify, the better your result. Begin. Without giving Ling Han any time to prepare, the hourglass began to count down, and an illusory image of a medicinal ingredient appeared in front of Ling Han. If he shook it with his hand, the medicinal ingredient could even move left and right, up and down, and all the details would be displayed. Black sun Terganoderma, fire maple orchid leaf, water tooth grass, purple firmament ironwood root. Ling Han answered very quickly. Usually, when the medicinal ingredient had just been changed, he would immediately call out its name. Thus, there was practically no time for this scene to pause, and it was changing rapidly. The hourglass flowed, and after about an hour, it had completely flowed out. "Pass," that cold voice said. "Pa." A jade scroll instantly appeared on the stone table, and at the same time, an illusory image of an hourglass appeared above Ling Han's head, and it had already begun to flow. According to the speed of the flow, it could last for about 10 days. 10 days? Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Chapter 1384. The golden carp leaped out of the water once again, and similarly spat out a black bubble. Ling Han grabbed at the air with his right hand, and the large hand of origin energy tightened as well. Hong, a huge wave instantly rose up in the pond, slapping towards the carp. With a ferocious strike, the carp was instantly sent flying. It opened its mouth and spat out a person. It was precisely the young man it had swallowed earlier. The moment he appeared, he let out a miserable shriek. It turned out that the majority of his flesh and blood had already been corroded by the acid. This carp directly swallowed a living person and then slowly digested him with its gastric juice. One could imagine what kind of intense pain this young man had to endure. Luckily, as long as his soul was not destroyed, and his dantian was not destroyed, then no matter how severe his injuries were, they could be healed. Seeing this scene, the 6 people by the pond were all astonished, and were convinced by Ling Han's strength. Too powerful. Just the materialization of origin energy, and he defeated that demonic carp. This was a crushing strength. The 6 people instantly extinguished the thought of snatching it, and hurriedly turned to leave, afraid that Ling Han would silence them. I never thought that the ancient Dao Green Lotus would land in the hands of an outsider like you. A figure streaked past, and Lin Zihong appeared by the pond, looking at him with an arrogant gaze, and said, "Hand over the divine lotus." And then? Ling Han said indifferently, provoking him time and time again, did they really think he had no temper? And then, Lin Zihong seemed to not have expected Ling Han to reply with such a question, and was stunned for a moment, before saying, "And then kneel on the ground, and kowtow to me 100 times. Ling Han looked at him and said, "I don't think I've offended you before, right? Hee, you dare to have ideas about my woman, and still dare to say you haven't offended me." Lin Zihong laughed coldly. There were only him and Ling Han here, so he naturally did not bother to hide his inner thoughts. Ling Han gave an "oh," and said, "Based on what you've said, you're determined to kill me. It won't be that easy." Lin Zihong laughed coldly. "I'll first destroy your physical body, then slowly refine your soul, and let you die in extreme pain." Ling Han let out an "oh" and revealed a smile. He said, "Since you put it that way, I can also be at ease and kill you boldly, lest I accidentally go too far." "Huh, you are merely in the low extreme, how could you be a match for me?" Lin Zihong laughed proudly. "I am in the peak stage of the medium extreme, and furthermore, I am a 3-star genius. Even if you are a 4-star genius, and are also in the peak stage of the low extreme, you are still far from being a match for me." It was precisely because he was certain that Ling Han could not possibly be his opponent that he was so overbearing. Ling Han murmured, "You're so confident. Don't cry when you get slapped in the face later. Who asked you to be so blind as to fight over a woman with me?" Lin Zihong moved and grabbed out at Ling Han. Power rolled out, reaching the height of the late stage of the high extreme, and was extremely terrifying. However, the structure of heaven and earth here was even more stable than that of the outside world. Even if heavenly body tier elites attacked, they wouldn't be able to cause much damage. Only the surface of the water rippled slightly. Lin Zihong's expression was filled with disdain. He had enough confidence that he could suppress Ling Han in a single move. The gap between their cultivation levels was really too wide. Ling Han, too, swung out a palm at Lin Zihong. Peng, the two forces collided and finally created a huge impact, shaking the surface of the water so much that waves appeared, rolling and howling wildly. Lin Zihong's expression was filled with astonishment. Ling Han had actually withstood his attack. Not only had he withstood it, he had done so easily. This was something that he could not accept. He was merely in the low extreme, so how could he possibly be so strong? In terms of power, Ling Han was indeed inferior to Lin Zihong, but he had used Tide of the Ages, and though he had only unleashed a tiny bit of its power, it was enough to age the other's power to a level that he could stand against. How is this possible? Lin Zihong could not accept it. Merely in the low extreme, how could he stand against me? The frog at the bottom of the well, Ling Han's gaze was sinister. Killing intent had already been unleashed. Humph! Lin Zihong very quickly adjusted his mentality. So what if he could stand against him? He was the son of the clan chief of the Anyuan branch. Though this branch had indeed declined, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse, and its foundation was still astonishing. How could a savage compare to it? He drew out a drum. It was very shabby, and one corner of it was already broken. Scenes of battle were drawn on the body of the drum. They were vivid and lifelike, and exuded the killing intent that was unique to the battlefield. He stretched out a hand and struck it. The battle drum immediately released a low, loud sound, and shot towards Ling Han's chest like an arrow, causing his heart to involuntarily beat rapidly. A sliver of blood seeped out from the corner of Ling Han's mouth. He shockingly discovered that his heart had actually cracked open. This was extremely shocking. How astonishing was his physique! Though the strength of his heart could not compare to godly bones, it had more or less reached the level of level 10 godly metal, and now it had actually cracked open. This drum was not simple. Most importantly, Ling Han had unknowingly fallen for the attack. He had not discovered at all where the attack had come from. This was the strangest part, and it was impossible to guard against. You want to fight with me? You are still not worthy. Lin Zihong smirked coldly. His eyes were fixed on Ling Han, and he suddenly sent out another slap. Poof! This time, Ling Han spat out a mouthful of blood. Die! Lin Zihong once again raised his hand, but it was at this moment that Ling Han moved. Using the star-plucking step, he instantly crossed a distance of 7 meters. Pung! The battle drum released a loud sound, but Ling Han was not affected in the slightest. As expected, Ling Han revealed a smile. With the circulation of the indestructible heaven scroll, his heart had already recovered. The sound of the drum is formless and cannot be avoided. However, it is only a dead object after all, and the caster needs to lock onto the target. So, I only need to avoid being locked onto by your divine sense, and the battle drum will not be able to do anything to me. You monster. Lin Zihong was dumbfounded. He had actually found a flaw after only being struck by 2 moves. Were you really human? Furthermore, after being struck by 2 consecutive sounds of the drum, this guy actually only spat out a mouthful of blood, and his heart did not explode. This was too exaggerated. It's my turn. Ling Han drew his sword. Wang, the divine demon sword seemed to have been stimulated. Without Ling Han needing to circulate it, it automatically shone with divine light, appearing to be restless. Ling Han simply let go. The divine demon sword instantly flew out, slashing towards Lin Zihong. More accurately, it was slicing towards that battle drum. Pung! Lin Zihong hurriedly struck the battle drum. Not only could this destroy living beings, it also possessed a frightening destructive ability against god tools. An invisible sound wave swept towards the divine demon sword. This was the might of regulations. This battle drum was forged by an ancient ancestor of the Anyuan branch who was in the eternal river tier. One had to be in the heavenly body tier at least to activate it. It used the sound wave of regulations to attack the enemy, invisible and formless. It was one of the 3 precious treasures of the Anyuan branch. Lin Zihong was also the only son of the current clan leader. Otherwise, how could he possibly take it out? Otherwise, if he encountered an eternal river tier elite who forcefully snatched it away, then the Anyuan branch that was already in decline would be in even more dire straits. The divine demon sword struck out, and was actually not affected by the sound of the drum. Reading on one's phone was even more refreshing. Chapter 1385. Lin Zihong was shocked. The immortal sword slashed down, but it was not affected at all. In his mind, once the sound of the drum rang out, any divine weapon would shatter and turn into fragments that streaked past his body, no longer having any destructive power. Yet how could he know that the intrinsic quality of the divine demon sword was at the level of divine metal? If he used brute force to strike it, then the divine demon sword would definitely have an upper limit. But now, if he only used regulations, then who would fear divine metal? Seeing the sword slashing over, before it even reached his body, that terrifying chill had already caused his heart to tremble. If he was really struck by it, he would definitely die on the spot. What kind of sword was this? It was too terrifying. He hurriedly retreated as he continued to beat the battle drum. He was unwilling to give up, and he wanted to shake the divine demon's sword off the ground. In fact, he even wanted to take it for himself. But this was destined to be a fantasy. The divine demon sword had already leapt into level 10, and was equal to Lin Zihong in terms of cultivation level, and if they were at the same cultivation level, if a precious tool forged from divine metal could not crush him, then what kind of divine metal could it be called? Shwa, shwa, shwa. The sword will spread out, turning into a large net, endless. Lin Zihong desperately tried to break out of the encirclement, but he was still struck by the sword intent a few times. Blood immediately spurted out of his body, and he couldn't stop it no matter what. And this was only because he had been slashed by the sword intent. If he had been directly slashed by the immortal sword, the baleful energy would have penetrated his body and caused even greater damage. "Hey," Ling Han said. All of a sudden, Lin Zihong's hair stood on end. He had only been concerned with dealing with the divine demon sword, and in his panic, he had no choice but to retreat to somewhere near Ling Han. This voice had precisely come from behind him. But to catch bandits, first catch the ringleader, since this was Ling Han's divine tool. As long as he could capture Ling Han, would he still be able to use it? With this thought, Lin Zihong instantly regained his confidence. He abruptly turned around and formed his hand into a claw, clawing at Ling Han. "I'll break your dog claws," laughed Ling Han. She actually dared to fight him in close combat. Where did her courage come from? He threw a punch at his opponent's hand. Bam! The two of them clashed. This time, it wasn't just the collision of their elemental energy, but also their hands. Lin Zihong's originally confident expression immediately crumbled, before revealing a look of intense pain. His 5 fingers had been forcefully broken, and they were all standing upright. His skin and flesh had been split open, and blood was dripping out. It was a ghastly sight. The 10 fingers were connected to the heart. Naturally, it hurt. Lin Zihong was still extremely shocked. He had the upper hand in terms of strength, so he also had to conserve energy to protect himself. He was definitely more skillful and at ease than Ling Han. However, the current situation was that his 5 fingers were all broken, but Ling Han was completely unharmed. Is there any justice in this? Ling Han used his finger as a sword and pointed it at Lin Zihong's forehead. At the juncture of life and death, Lin Zihong actually burst forth with a strong will to survive. Ignoring the piercing pain in his right hand, he forcefully pulled himself back. "Be careful behind you," Ling Han reminded. But why would Lin Zihong listen to his enemy? He struck the war drum with the back of his palm. At such a close distance, Ling Han would definitely not be able to escape. Poof. His hand had not even touched the war drum when he felt a coldness in his chest. He saw the tip of a sword pierce through his chest. Divine demon sword. He had actually forgotten that there was such a great killing weapon. Just as the pressure the divine demon sword gave him previously was too great, causing him to forget about Ling Han, now Ling Han similarly gave him the pressure of life and death, causing him to temporarily forget about the divine demon sword, but this was fatal. The divine demon sword had entered his body, and had even pierced through such a vital point as his heart. How could he save him? The murderous aura spread throughout Lin Zihong's body. His heart was the first to shatter, and he was instantly heavily injured, but this was still not the most frightening thing, because the murderous aura was currently attacking his consciousness and Dantian. If the Dantian was destroyed, then his cultivation would be completely lost. If the consciousness was severed, then his soul would dissipate. Lin Zihong's face turned green in fear. At this moment, he really felt that death was approaching. "Save me!" His eyes suddenly lit up, and he called out to Ling Han. Ling Han was given a fright. What kind of weirdo was this, actually asking him for help? "I am the young clan leader of the Anyuan branch, and you are only a mere foreign official. I command you!" Lin Zihong called out. He desperately suppressed the expansion of the murderous aura in his body, but this was the power of regulation, inherent in divine metal. How could the strength of its destructive power be something that a heavenly body tier could resist? It could be said that even if a Genesis tier was pierced through a vital point, they would similarly be heavily injured. At most, they would be able to barely control their injuries, but they could forget about self-healing. Ling Han couldn't help but be speechless. Was this guy still flaunting his superiority even now? I'll give Lin Yuqi to you. Lin Zihong screamed. It was almost too late. The murderous aura had already reached his throat and reached his lower abdomen, and was only a step away from his consciousness and Dantian. She was not yours in the first place, so how can you say you'll give her to me? Furthermore, I have never had any thoughts about Lin Yuqi. It is your own wishful thinking, Ling Han said calmly. He naturally would not make a move to save her. Lin Zihong showed an expression of despair, and at the same time, he also felt deep regret. At this time, Ling Han should not be deceiving him. It was all his fault for being petty. No, in the final analysis, it was still because he was too high and mighty. Even if he suspected him to be a rival in love, so what? He could just wipe him off with a wave of his hand. In any case, everyone in the world was like an ant in his eyes. It was this kind of mentality that caused him to be unbridled and look down on everyone. But this kind of despair and regret only flashed past for a moment. In the next moment, he became crazy. Since he was definitely going to die, he would drag Ling Han down with him. Explode, he roared, and took the initiative to shatter his Dantian. The two heavenly bodies collided fiercely, giving rise to a terrifying energy storm. The self-detonation of a heavenly body tier elite, even if it was only in the medium extreme, could match the full power attack of an elite in the low extreme of the Eternal River tier, or even the medium extreme. Suddenly, the terrifying energy formed a frenzied tide, and with Lin Zihong as the center, it blasted out in all directions. The strongest attack of an Eternal River tier. What heavenly body tier could block it? Lin Zihong's physical body shattered at the first instant. His spirit left his body, and the murderous aura of the divine demon sword followed him like a shadow, but he could still struggle at death's door for a while. He wanted to, personally, see Ling Han killed by him. Ling Han's figure flashed, and he had already entered into the Black Tower. At this time, there was naturally no need to put on a brave front and test whether his physique could withstand the attack of an Eternal River tier. Then, he took a step out, and because his speed was too fast, it was practically as if he had not left. Ling Han was standing in front of him unscathed, and not even a corner of his clothes was damaged. Even Lin Zihong's spirit was twisted, and he released a roar of indignation, but when the murderous aura of the divine demon sword swept past, his spirit also instantly withered. This time, his spirit had really been completely destroyed, and not even the slightest bit of his remains remained. This can also be considered as settling a karma, Ling Han said calmly, yet stretched out a hand to put away the spatial spirit tool that Lin Zihong had left behind after his self-detonation. TSK, as expected of the son of a clan chief. Not only did he have over 100 million true origin stones, there was also a considerable amount of godly metal and medicinal ingredients, all of which were extremely precious. Of course, the most valuable thing was that battle drum. Chapter 1386. This battle drum can unleash the regulations of the Eternal River tier at most. Ling Han held the battle drum. It was too ancient, as if he would be smashed into pieces if he dropped it on the ground. However, in the hands of a heavenly body tier, it shouldn't be able to reach such heights. Otherwise, my heart should have exploded previously and not been injured. This should be a precious treasure of the Anyuan branch. In front of the people of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, it's best that I don't expose it. This is practically writing a few words on my forehead. I killed Lin Zihong. Strictly speaking, Lin Zihong indeed wasn't killed by me. He self-destructed. But as long as I'm not on the Cloud Apex planet, this battle drum can be used as I please, especially when I'm in the Myriad Directions galaxy. Even if I advance into the Eternal River tier, it can still unleash extraordinary effects. The most important thing is still the Divine Demon Sword. As expected of a Divine Demon Sword, as long as I'm struck, the vital parts will definitely die. If it's not a vital part, I can still protect myself by immediately cutting off the injured part. Otherwise, the murderous aura will spread, and I'll still die. This is a higher level of regulations. Even if the Divine Demon Sword hasn't truly advanced to become a celestial tool, It still transcends above ordinary god tools. Ling Han mumbled internally as he collected the battle trophies. He gave himself 6 days to wander around, and on the 7th day he had to rush to the hub of this level. If it was like the words, Grand Yang Palace, resonating with him and absorbing its power, wouldn't he be able to advance another step? He swept through the trophies excitedly. This was the world of godly medicines, and they were priceless, making Ling Han very happy as he collected them. However, this level was ultimately different from the first level. Demonic beasts weren't things that Ling Han could draw into the Black Tower at will. They had self-awareness, so they had to be defeated first. But if they could be defeated, would there be a need to draw them into the Black Tower? The demonic beasts here were all companions with godly medicines and didn't consume them as food. Instead, they absorbed the medicinal effects that overflowed from the godly medicines and grew stronger along with them. The majority of the demonic beasts were at the Sun-Moon tier, and Ling Han could suppress them with a single hand. However, there were also heavenly body tier demonic beasts, which would be slightly more troublesome. However, if he encountered one at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, even Ling Han would have to take a detour. He would first lure the demonic beasts away, and then return to harvest the godly medicine. When there was no one else around, Ling Han had tried using that battle drum. Its destructive power was limited against those at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. It could wound them, but it would also cause the demonic beasts to become even more frenzied. Most frighteningly, there was also an old tortoise at the Eternal River tier here. It was as large as a mountain, and on its back was a level 13 godly medicine. That was a tea tree, and its name was Zen tea. The leaves could be added into the tea. Of course, it needed to be concocted by an alchemist to extract the concept and regulations of heaven and earth contained within. Tasting it would help one comprehend Tao, and would be beneficial to cultivators at the Eternal River tier and below. Ling Han tried his best to think of a way, but faced with an Eternal River tier elite, he was unable to withstand the surge of that wisp of aura. And this was still because that old tortoise had been in a deep slumber all this while. Otherwise, if it took the initiative to attack, there would definitely be no living creature that could survive on this second level. Ling Han spent 2 days here, and had even thrown out the notionless saint, but it was still useless. That former saint was indeed a good tool to use to scare others, but the old tortoise had been in a deep slumber all this time, and would not wake up no matter how he tried, so how could he scare them? Furthermore, if there was no hourglass above his head, the moment this person came out, he would immediately begin to feel weak, and would be expelled from the Medicine King's cave. Ling Han hurriedly recalled the notionless saint, and could not avoid being cursed by this former saint again. Forget it, a wise man does not fight when the odds are against him. A good man would not fuss over this little bit of gain and loss, he consoled himself, but his face was twisted, and he was 100% insincere in his words. Sighing sorrowfully, Ling Han went to a few valuable places, and still made considerable gains. Finally, he arrived at the end of this level. The Cleansing Dust Palace. Ling Han gazed at the 3 words above the palace, and similarly discovered that some kind of power was sealed within them. However, what made him depressed was that he could not form a resonance with it, and thus absorb this power. He was extremely depressed. This represented a sub-minor level, and it could save him at least a few hundred years of bitter cultivation. He was unwilling to give up and continued to try. In any case, there was still a lot of time, so he was not in a hurry. A day and a night passed, and he still did not make any progress, so he could only give up. Little handsome boy, a sweet voice sounded, and he saw Lin Yuqi gracefully walking over from afar. She was still waving her arms, and as she pulled down her sleeves, a fair and tender arm was revealed, and it would cause one's heart to palpitate. Thankfully, there were less than 100 heavenly body tier elites here. Who would dare to stare at such an elite and reveal a lustful gaze? Ling Han nodded. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and when she came closer, he asked, "Do you want a good fortune?" An expression of doubt appeared on Lin Yuqi's face, and she said, "Are you trying to trick me into your bed? Hee, if you like me, just say it. It's not like I can't consider marrying you and doting on you every day in the future." Ling Han ignored her. As long as he did not respond, she would definitely become bored as she spoke. He pointed at the 3 words above the palace and said, "There is a martial art intent left behind by an elite there. As long as you can form a resonance with it, you will be able to increase your cultivation level." Really? Lin Yuqi's expression was filled with doubt. If it was so awesome, why didn't he take it for himself? "Little handsome boy, in order to trick me into being touched, your move is far too lame. However, at least you have the heart. Big sister is still slightly touched." Ling Han put on a stern expression and said, "It's up to you whether you believe me or not." After saying this, he strode into the palace, and he discovered that after entering, the hourglass above his head had stopped flowing. In other words, he could properly prepare here before taking the test. Lin Yuqi watched as Ling Han entered the palace, a confused expression on her pretty face. Logically speaking, Ling Han should not have used such a low-level method to deceive her. So be it. She raised her head, and under her full concentration, it was as if she had formed some kind of resonance with the 3 words. The origin power in her body surged violently, as if it were about to burst out. It really was like this. She hurriedly focused on guiding it, and not long after, her slender body was exuding a divine light, and her cultivation level was rapidly rising. If Ling Han had been here, he would definitely have yelled about how unfair this was. After all, he was completely unable to trigger the 3 words above. In fact, when he had been on the first level, he had also used 3 days to trigger the resonance of the 3 words, Grand Sun Palace. How could he have been as fast as she was? Peak stage of the low extreme. After 30 minutes, Lin Yuqi exclaimed in pleasant surprise, "Little handsome boy, you are so good to Big Sister, so how can Big Sister let you off? Just obediently accept your fate, Big Sister is definitely going to devour you." She also entered the palace. After sweeping through the first level for a long time, she did not waste any time after arriving on the second level. She did this to accumulate enough time to stay here so that she could go to the 5th level to obtain a portion of godly medicine. This was also the main reason why she had come here. Chapter 1388. It really was possible. Ling Han had now passed through 3 palaces, and the words left behind on each palace were different, indicating that there was more than one elite here. If the 9 palaces were all like this, then it meant that there had once been as many as 9 elites here. To say that these 9 people had all died suddenly, without leaving behind a single heir, this was a little unreasonable, wasn't it? That would be strange. However, nothing had happened for hundreds of millions of years. It couldn't be that he would be so unlucky and suddenly meet with an accident, right? Ling Han shrugged. He had the luck of heaven and earth on him, so he definitely wouldn't be so miserable. The 3rd stage was a test of piecing together medicinal ingredients. This was naturally Ling Han's specialty, and in this kind of test, there were not only 810,000 basic medicinal ingredients, there were also derived varieties, but Ling Han had grasped the basics, so even if he had never seen them before, he was not afraid. With the knowledge he had grasped, the accuracy was still as high as 100%. This time, he had another 10 days' time. Ling Han put away the pill recipe and entered the 4th level. He immediately felt a high temperature rush toward him, and before him, many mountains of fire appeared, spewing out fierce flames, and boiling red lava flowed. Even the air was burning until layers of ripples appeared. Needless to say, this was a world of fire element godly medicines. There might be exploding fruits here. Because there was even less information on this level, Ling Han could not search according to the map, and instead began a carpet search. Fortunately, he had enough time. 7 days later, he arrived at the foot of a mountain, and before him was a fiery red forest. The leaves were all burning with flames, but they were not burned to ashes. Upon closer inspection, these flames were obviously emitted by these leaves themselves. Between the leaves, there were many bright red fruits, shaped like pineapples, causing Ling Han to smile. Exploding fruits. After searching for so many days, he had finally found them. Sha, 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 there was a strange sound among the leaves. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, and saw that there were actually many crimson snakes coiled on the branches. They were not long, only 1 or 2 feet long, and most of them were very quiet, but a few were wriggling as they ate, and their food was precisely exploding fruits. They even ate exploding fruits. What a strong taste. Since this was called the exploding fruit, it was naturally because it would explode. However, these scarlet snakes were stuffing their mouths into it. Why weren't they afraid that their stomachs would explode? Ling Han didn't dare to fight here. The exploding fruit was extremely unstable and would explode with the slightest impact. He wasn't here to sweep away the snakes. Therefore, after some thought, he took out the war drum. Peng, he smacked down, and his target was a crimson snake. The snake's body instantly stiffened, and it fell from the tree. His courage was shattered, and his divine sense was shattered. Naturally, he died. He continued to beat the drum, and scarlet snakes fell from the trees like rain. Though the creatures here had not developed intelligence, their survival instincts were still there. The remaining crimson snakes all targeted Ling Han and began to attack him. Ling Han wasn't shocked, but was happy instead. He wasn't afraid of these snakes, but was worried that he would detonate the fruits on the trees if he made a move. Since they were willing to come down, then that couldn't be any better. Heavens might spread out. Pa, 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 pa. Instantly, there were several hundred scarlet snakes that directly flipped over their stomachs. It was just that tyrannical. As long as one's strength was slightly weaker than Ling Han's, they wouldn't even have the chance to make a move, and their courage would immediately be shattered. However, there were still as many as 100 scarlet snakes that swam towards Ling Han. The 100 snakes moved in unison, rubbing against the ground and emitting rustling sounds. It was as if there was some kind of magical power that caused Ling Han to feel upset and upset. They could be considered to have some strength. Ling Han circulated his origin power, and instantly, his soul guarded his mind. He gave a long hiss, and wang, the sound waves vibrated, completely suppressing the sounds of the 100 snakes slithering. Shio shio shio. These scarlet snakes arched their bodies, and launched a fierce attack towards Ling Han. Each of them was like a sharp arrow. Ling Han shot out a punch, and the terrifying fist force vibrated. Instantly, 7 or 8 scarlet snakes were directly crushed into mincemeat. This was overwhelming power. After throwing out a few more punches, the remaining scarlet snakes finally didn't dare to attack anymore. Instead, they retreated like the tide, and didn't return to that fire forest. Instead, they started a great migration. Ling Han unceremoniously drew this fire forest into the Black Tower, not leaving behind a single tree. In this way, he would be able to endlessly collect exploding fruits and concoct a large amount of flying fire pills, which he could throw at whoever he disliked. After sweeping this place clean, there was no longer any need for Ling Han to stay on the 4th level. He went to the end of this level. Battle Sword Palace. Ling Han held the signboard and read softly. In that instant, he discovered that he was resonating with these 3 words. The originally still 3 words seemed to have transformed into 3 swords that were dancing and impassioned, charging towards the 9 heavens. After a moment of absent-mindedness, he suddenly discovered that the 3 words above his head had already dimmed, and his cultivation level had advanced a step further, reaching the late stage of the low extreme. If he could reach the peak stage of the low extreme here, then after leaving, he could take advantage of the time he spent traversing the galaxy to cultivate in seclusion and attempt to break through to the medium extreme. Ling Han was filled with longing. There were still 5 palace halls left, and he only needed a little bit of luck to be able to achieve his goal. As expected, it was still heavenly origin Dao fruit, but it was mutated and had been fused with something else. The 4th level was a test of distinguishing and mixing medicinal ingredients. Ling Han once again obtained the best result, and obtained 10 days of staying time. If this continued, when he reached the 8th level, he would probably be able to stay for at least 40 days. If he still couldn't find the 8th level palace hall after this, Ling Han would have to admit defeat. After collecting the pill recipe Jade Scroll, Ling Han arrived at the 5th level. The sky was grayish-black, and there was heavy fog, exuding an air of death. This was a land of death. The ground was barren, and there was not the slightest sign of life as far as the eye could see. What kind of godly medicine could be born in such a barren land? Regarding this place, there was only one mark on the map. Flower of Makara, Ling Han murmured. This was a level 16 godly medicine, but rather than calling it a godly medicine, it was more appropriate to call it a poisonous object. Makara was an ancient word, and represented the meaning of death, and this poisonous flower lived up to its name. When the flower bloomed, its fragrance would spread for thousands of miles, and it could poison and kill everything. Even eternal river tears would not be spared. Smelling this flower's fragrance meant eternal rest. And the value of this kind of poisonous flower lay in the fact that if it was plucked before the flower bloomed, then in the future, as long as one used origin power to activate it, it would immediately bloom and kill everyone apart from the one who held the poisonous flower. This was terrifying. Whoever plucked this poisonous flower would be equivalent to possessing a great killing tool that would make even eternal river tier elites tremble. Furthermore, this time just happened to be the time when the flower of Makara was about to bloom. If anyone could pluck this poisonous flower, then the corresponding clan or branch would undoubtedly have astonishing power of speech, and it would be enough to protect them for eternity. Should I go? Ling Han thought. In any case, he was going to take a stroll here, so he might as well go along with it. He set out, and 4 hours later, a mountain valley appeared in front of him. It was completely made of grayish-black rocks, and in the center of the mountain valley, there was a strange flower with rippling colors. Its base was like a person's, and in its hands, there was a flower. The petals were tightly closed and had not bloomed yet. In the surroundings of the mountain valley, there were almost 100 people standing guard. They are tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure,